And I called a mayday on the radio, hit the ground. I was conscious for the whole thing. I heard the thud and disembodied voice, do you want to live or die? And I'm like, what? Because first of all, I thought there's no way I'm going to live. You know, even when I hit, it was just crunch. And I knew I broke my back right away. This is in the height of the glam. It was probably 86 or something. And I've got the white spandex with the pink panties and the whole thing going on. We had police escorts from the dressing room to the stage in Houston. Well, when we moved to LA, that was a whole different story. That was early '87, and
Sure.
it was definitely a struggle. That's when we recorded the EP with Dana Strum. There was a Poison stenciled logo all over Hollywood, and Joey said, when we got to town, we realized they had painted the town Poison. It's like Sweet Savage, Cinderella Night songs, Poison, Look What the Cat Dragged In. Brett came, and he and Cece sat in. Janie was there. There's this great picture of Janie, Brett, and Joey. That was taken that night. Sweet Savage breaking up was worse than me breaking my back in a plane crash. And it's not just like we lost our singer.
Yeah.
It was the betrayal. So to say that grunge killed glam or rock and roll or the 80s, it's not really true. Grunge, the corpse was already rotting, I think.
Yep.
I think it had just eaten itself. By the time I broke my back in the plane crash, I had been so devastated by the demise of Sweet Savage, because it wasn't a band, it was my dream. Never looked back, so that was my sober date, December 28th, 05. I recommend the program, anybody, I'll sponsor you if anybody's struggling.
Your story is begging for a documentary, a book.
The hair metal guru, from Warren to crew. The hair metal guru, never forget Charlie too.
Welcome to the Hair Metal Guru. My name is Anthony. They call me the Guru. And with me is Chris Sheridan, who at various times in his life has been a comedian, a filmmaker, a pilot who survived a tragic crash, which I hope to get into later. But fans of this channel may remember him as the guitarist and founding member of the band Sweet Savage, who dominated the Sunset Strip in the mid-'80s, right alongside bands like Poison and Warrant, and are kind of famous for being one of the Hollywood bands that was this close. Chris, welcome to the show.
Anthony, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of start because I want to get into the Sweet Savage story. I want to hear about all the other things you did, and you just have a phenomenal story. But for those of you who don't know, what were your musical beginnings? Like because Sweet Savage was you and your brother Lane started it. So how did you and your brother start getting into music? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, it actually was Joey C. Jones too. We all grew up together in a small town, Appalachia, southeastern Ohio, and we were actually into skateboarding in the 70s. So we would go skating and we would listen to it was before Van Halen. This was like 76, 77. So we were listening to Aerosmith and AC/DC. We were like big into AC/DC in the Bond years. Yep. And Rush, anything like that, even Molly Hatchet, just anything with guitar, driving, it seemed to go with the skating. And after a while, we thought, wait a minute, we're going to get nowhere skateboarding out of Ohio. You got to be in LA and forget that. And it's like, let's just play. We like the rock, so we already knew all the songs in our head, and we'd been going to concerts already, seeing bands. And so that was music we were listening to while skating. That's the stuff we learned how to play in high school. And actually, Sweet Savage started in '84, but we had been playing in some version or another since '79. So we're kind of a late '70s start in high school and then hitting the bars after that, early '80s. So we had 5 years of really working things out before we then all came back together to start the band. But that was the early thing, AC/DC, Aerosmith. And then when Van Halen came out, certainly Van Halen and Priest, Cheap Trick, anything from the 70s, late 70s, it was really going on. And of course, Kiss was probably the thing before that, before even skateboarding. I was listening to Kiss. Right.
So were your parents very musical? I mean, how do two brothers end up playing guitar and bass? And, so can you what was that situation like? Like, how did you and your brother first end up picking up instruments?
Well, it was piano. My mom had a piano and she played a little bit and would sing. And we thought it was like, wow, so, mom sitting in front of a piano playing and singing a song. Like, she didn't do it very often, but we thought that was cool. And we started playing in band. Lane played drums, actually, and I
Okay.
played trumpet in concert band and then in marching band in high school. And by the time we were in high school, the marching band section of the school had all these practice rooms, and we just bring our amps in and jam. We
Yeah.
didn't play our own, and we didn't know any of the songs for halftime. But boy, we were working on Sweet Emotion and all this stuff in the back hallway. So there was always this musical thing going on. But the piano, the marching band, concert band, that wasn't it. We were just about the rock and roll. That was really what was happening then.
Sure.
And in a way, rock and roll was kind of underground. It wasn't quite mainstream. The stuff AC/DC certainly wasn't. And so it was kind of like, this is our music. There was a lot of Eagles and, Doobie Brothers and, 70s going on, that we were like, nah, we like Aerosmith. We like the way they look and what they're rocking about.
So the beginning, so you meet Joey C. Jones, who becomes the singer
Yeah.
in Sweet Savage, but this is in Ohio, right?
Yeah. Late 70s, 77, 78. So
So
by 79, we were playing gigs.
okay.
And by 80, 81, we were playing bars.
So what was the scene like? And was it like, okay, we're just playing covers? When did there become a thought that, you know what? We might be able to do something with this and take it to the next level.
Yeah, well, we kind of went our separate ways after high school. There was a little bit of span between me. I was a couple years younger, still am, than the other guys. And so they moved to Columbus, which was the big city. And there were great clubs there, like the Alrosa Villa and Screaming Willie's and the Agora. There were, every weekend there were 3 or 4 clubs that would have 500 or 600 people there listening to live music and a lot of original stuff. So even in Columbus, and that's like where the Gods were from.
Yep.
And, we knew those guys. And Mark Sheffield started a band afterward called Rosie. And they were packing it at the Alrosa I went up there on a fake ID on a school night, to see these
Right.
guys. But they were doing original sets with covers kind of peppered in, but a little more remake-ish, not
Yeah.
like we're a top 40 band or something like that. So we knew the original thing was what it was all about. And fortunately, Columbus really early on supported that with local acts. They actually wanted you to play, at least an amount of your own original music. So that was always on the horizon. But Lane ended up moving to Texas. He moved to Dallas like in 82 or 83 on the advice of Mark Sheffield, actually, from the Gods. Later on, played with Bob Seger for a lot of years.
Okay.
And he said, no, because Lane's like, I moved to LA. And he's like, no, go to Dallas. And it's like, oh, okay. There's a great music scene there and everything. So he heard about it. And I would come down every year and see him and check out the scene. But then it was in 84 that we all were in Dallas. And we knew we were just going to take everything that we had learned all those years, slugging it out in the clubs, cover tunes, whatever, shitty bands. And then let's bring this up. So Sweet Savage really sort of began with a culmination of everything we had done up until that point.
So what was the band called when you guys were in Ohio? Or was it
Originally, it
called?
was Truce.
Okay.
And Joey played in different bands. Lane played in different bands.
Sure.
Everyone was in like a band or two. I was in a band called Talon.
Okay.
Joey was in Assassin.
So
Lane
did you
was-
guys develop like was there hey, did you guys get kind of a name going in Ohio? Was it were you
not
getting
as a
much
group.
attention?
Yeah, well, after high school and stuff, there really wasn't a group with us. We were individually
Sure.
small fires working on
Yep.
our own thing. Now we'd still get together, we'd hang out, we'd see each other's band, we'd sit in and do things like that. But each of us individually, like Joey was really getting a name as being a singer because guitar players are a dime a dozen and
Yeah.
you can always find a drummer. But a singer who can actually sing and has a good look and rocks out, that was Joey, and he was getting better. Every one of us got better. So,
Right.
like I said, by the time we got together and we did Sweet Savage on purpose, I was sending Lane demo tapes of originals I was working on. Lane came up to watch Joey and see how much he'd improved. Actually, last gig he played at the Alrosa before moving down to Texas to hook up with us, and We built the band there. So it's really a Dallas band because we didn't have a name. We didn't know if we're going to have two guitar players or, what was the thing. It was just the three of us, this core that was putting this thing together. And so the birth, the name, everything really came out of Dallas.
So were you the first? So Lane moved to Dallas, then you moved to Dallas. Then did Joey come later? And
Yeah,
what was the
yeah.
beginning of, okay, we're in Dallas, we're going to get this thing going here?
Yeah, well, that's the sole reason why we all moved down there was
Yep.
to start that band together.
Yep. Okay. And did Joey come right away when you went down as well?
A couple months later.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure. So
that
what
gave me a
was,
chance to kind of see what was going on, like
yeah,
with the scene there. It was a little different. You had to play 2 sets a night, sometimes 3 and 4 nights a week.
yeah,
You get paid, but you had to do covers. There's no way, no one's got 2 hours worth of original music that's any good anyway when you're, that early on in your career. And so, you have to do covers, but that's fine because we were just playing the songs we liked anyway.
right.
And in '84, so I saw bands like Black Star and Savvy's, Ricky Lynn Project, Lightning, really good band. Lightning, the bass player, Barney, ended up being in Lord Tracy
Yeah.
with Terry
Terry
from
Glaze.
Pantera. And speaking of which, I saw them on a rainy Tuesday, early '84. We were all underage, and Pantera was amazing. I'd heard about this guitar player. Oh, you got to go see this guy. There's a guy in this band, Pantera. It's really good. He just won a contest. He won a Dean and a Randall, and he's a real flash player and everything. And went up there and saw them. It was before Sweet Savage even, before Joey even came down. So I'm just checking out local acts.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, the band was like, okay, we knew we had one up on the band because we were tight. We'd been together. We'd been playing clubs for a long, long time. These guys were still in high school, practically just out of high school like me.
Yeah.
But man, Darrell, you could just tell right away, very first night, and the band had a thing too, no doubt. I mean, they were a good
Sure.
band. They were tight. They played the covers great.
Sure.
But Darrell was definitely otherworldly for sure, even then.
And it's kind of ironic that you talk about meeting Pantera and Darrell, and your start was playing clubs like the Al Rosa Villa. Well, if people don't remember, the Al Rosa is where the tragedy happened, where Darrell was shot. So anyway, I just wanted to make that connection if people didn't know it. So
Unthinkable tragedy. It could have happened anywhere in any club under any circumstance. It would have been an equally great loss. But for me and Lane and Joey and a couple other people, because we told those guys, well, you got to go to Columbus and play the El Rosa. And but it was the place to play in Columbus.
Sure.
I mean, it wasn't a big secret, but we had been going there for years. But to find out that it was there, that stage I had played with my brother dozens
Right.
of times.
Right.
I know what the
Right.
backstage dressing room smells like, and all this memory and stuff was just that extra level of irony, but a total loss. And man, you can talk about Dime being a great guitar player, and I think he kept the electric guitar like the lead guitar, like what a
Yep.
lead guitarist doing alive during the '90s and early 2000s when none of that was happening. That wasn't cool. Nobody could do it. It's like, get out of here with that. He kept that going. I think single-handedly, he's owed that. But what you may not know about him is that guy was funnier than hell. He loved pranks. He loved jokes. Even at his own expense, he would get
Right.
the joke out to go for the laugh. And if you want a quick Dime story.
Please.
Okay, so I'm kind of fast forwarding in the chronology.
It's all right.
But it doesn't matter. We're talking about Dime, and you can talk about Dime anytime.
Right.
So we're playing this club, Savvy's in Fort Worth, and there's this whole circuit in Dallas, or in Texas, actually. You could play this club in Houston, this one in Fort Worth, this one in Austin, this one in San Antonio. And, a month goes by, and then you just cycle it again, and you're back in Fort Worth, and you get paid. So it's a circuit. So we were playing, but if we had a night off, we'd go see those guys, or if they had a night off when we were in town, they'd come see us and sit in and hang out, party your ass off and do all those things.
Oh.
Well, so we're about ready to go on, and the backstage bathroom was it was out of order, right? And
Right.
I'm like wearing, this is in the height of the glam. It's probably 86 or something. And I've got the white spandex with the pink panties and the whole thing going on. And I got to drop one. And it may not have been good. So I go, what do I do? What do I do? And I saw Dime. I go, Dime, get back here. He goes, man, I got to do a number two. What do I do? The bathroom's cooked. Is there like some just other part in this club that I don't know about? He goes, yeah, man, got you covered. Follow me. I follow him around the corner behind the DJ booth, and there's this other restroom. Didn't know anything about it. And he looked in. He goes, yeah, coast is clear. Come on. He goes, I'll watch the door. I'll make sure nobody comes in. Got you covered. All right. I go in, do my thing. No problems. Everything came out all right. All good. And then I'm like peeking out the door, and I see Dime. Dime's like, oh, yeah. Come on. He's like looking around. Yeah, coast is clear. Come on. And I go around the corner, and there's like 25 people. Just busting up laughing. And I turned to Dime and I'm like, dude, what the? And he is literally doubled over. Like his knees are wobbly like a boxer in the 15th round. He is Latin and throwing back. I've never seen anybody laugh so hard. So he had a good one on me, but it was totally worth the laugh. But to me, those are as great as a guitar player and person he was. I mean, to me, that's Dime, just going for the laugh.
It's kind of off topic, but just speaking about Dime, I was told people I was never the biggest Pantera fan. They were a little bit too heavy for me, but I could sit and watch those Pantera home videos and Dime and the crazy shit that he would do and the things, like paying their security to eat like a 10-pound cake and offering them $3,000 and just all the partying and the fun. Like those guys, like I would have given anything to party with those guys back in the day. They just look like they made rock and roll a blast. So anyway, so that story just really kind of brings that home.
Oh yeah. For as hardcore a metal band, and certainly they were, definitely a fun rock band. But actually they weren't. From Terry and in the early days, they were really a glam band.
Yes.
See, back then, and we'll get into the hair metal thing because I have the answer to that conundrum. But back then, there was a line between glam and metal. You could have long hair, and you probably grew up learning the same Judas Priest and Iron Maiden songs and going to the same concerts. Yep. But the road forked, and it kind of was glam and it kind of was metal. And I remember probably the same club was about a year later, or maybe it was 85. I don't know. Whenever they made the switch, Dime comes up to me and he goes, "Hey man, we're doing it." And I'm like, "Doing what?" He goes, "We're going for it. We're going metal all the way." And he looked at me and goes, "All the way." And I go, "Yeah, we're getting a new singer, the whole thing. We're going for it." And I was like, hallelujah. It seemed like such a brilliant idea. And they were playing more like Metallica, like the cover part of your set. So they were kind of edging that direction anyway, and played a lot of Priest when we might do a little more AC/DC and stuff like that. And so it was, but they made a conscious decision and they never looked back. So that to me is the line between glam and metal, and Pantera kind of wrapped that up into one band. But it probably hurt them commercially in the 80s. Sure. But it left the door wide open for them in the 90s. And they actually paved their own way. Right. Every glam band in the 80s had a whole history and a whole industry behind you, and a whole bunch of other bands to compete with. Right. But when they came through and came out, it was full underground, full word of mouth, and just just amazing. And I'm so proud of those guys too. It's like they stuck to their guns. They knew what they wanted to do. They wouldn't let up, and that's what they did, and it freaking worked. Yeah.
Can you go back to, so you moved to Dallas, you check out the scene. So what was it like building your name? And you said you started Sweet Savage around 84. What was it like building, your reputation? Because I know you became really big in Dallas, but can you tell me about the beginnings and building that up?
Yeah, well, that was, like I was saying, as we were getting the band together, we're going out. We would dress. We would, not poser dress, but kind of rocker casual, nice, right. Not that you're going to play, but you're not just some Yahoo in the bar either, Right. And come in together, like the three of us, and we would sit in with some of the bands, because Lane had been there a couple years. He knew a lot of people. Yeah. And we'd go see somebody's band, and then we'd come in. Then it was like, it was three of us would play a song together, and that's like the core of the band. We didn't have a drummer or second guitar player yet, but so people got to see us at least sit in play, and there was a lot of buzz, a lot of people were talking because we were new, and we had all the hair, and we did the whole blonde thing.
Right.
So it was kind of a little mystery, but it was like this preview. So there was this launch, this ramping up to it. And then when we were ready, we got Randy, and we had another guitar player. Actually, we had two guitar players for almost the first year, about the first 9 months of the band. And he had big following. Michael Scott, he had a big following at the time personally. So getting that together, I think our first weekend was like set an attendance record, or the fire department came in or something, because people wanted a new band, and here we were the next new thing, but we were so visible. We were out there. It was almost like LA type promotion in Dallas, and so, yeah. And we had, again, when we came out as Sweet Savage, this was after years of experience,
Sure.
at least 5 years of full on, either together or separately, and then coming back together working on this stuff. So we were fired up, and we had the big amp line. A lot of them were dummies, they had to be, because they would have been too heavy, first of all.
Right.
And 8 Marshall cabinets, 8 Marshall heads, and big in this wall. We had extra lights even for our first show, so we knew how to do up the production. That's probably the biggest thing we learned in Columbus with the Gods and Rosie. They had such professional production, but you were in a club, so you could kind of see behind the curtain. You could see what was going on. You go to a big rock show, and it's like, there's so many lights and trucks, and you don't even know what's going on. You're just in awe of the whole thing. But at a club, you can say, oh, the crew guys wore black t-shirts so they don't draw attention. Oh, they fixed the scrim on the drum riser. Oh, they brought in extra lights, and they got the guys tuning the guitar off to the side, not like in the spotlight, little
Right.
things like that. And we were sticklers for it. You show up at the club at the same time, together, or you wait in the parking lot, then you come in and force. You don't talk to anybody and sit down and have a beer with your friend before the end of the first set. After the first set, if you're doing 2 sets, yeah, go out, party, do the whole thing. But that way, there's a little mystery. The first time somebody sees you is when you're fully done up, the smoke's on, please welcome, and the lights go on. So it was things like that, I think, that gave us, a lot of professionalism that really wasn't happening in Dallas at the time.
What were you guys playing? Were there, like, I'm assuming you're playing still a lot of covers. Did you start writing original material and introduce that when you were in Dallas?
Yeah, we had On the Rocks, actually. That was our first song. Our first gig, we played that song.
Sure.
For sure. And there was a couple more that weren't quite there that we had probably in a couple weeks played. But when you're playing 2 sets a night, you can just throw one in, maybe second set.
Right.
In between a couple covers, maybe no one will know. But it's not like you have to rehearse to get the song. It's like you rehearse it and get it down, and then you're out there playing it. Then you're really learning the song and even writing it in some ways, tested under fire. So yeah, we just kept throwing in originals, replacing a cover, and we rotated the covers too, because this was like summer of '84. That's when everything was happening. Out of the Cellar was out.
Yep.
Great White was out. Of course, Crew been out for a while, but it was way pre-Poison, all that stuff. But Judas Priest, some of these bands, like us festival bands, Crew, they were big bands. Van Halen were doing their final tour, and at least at the time, and so we just like, oh hell, let's learn Drop Dead Legs. Okay, we'll learn the apartment and then play it that night at the club. And then if it works, it stays. If not. So, we did Black and Blue, like Hold On to 18. We did Great White, Stick It. That was like their first song, Stick It.
Right.
But when you play clubs, sometimes you got to amuse yourself, especially when you play some of the same covers, several times a week after week. Yep. So you might alter the lyrics a little bit. So what we did at the end of that song where it does the round, suck it, lick it, fuck it, and we just kind of did that. That's fun. It's good fun bar band stuff to do. Well, fast forward years later to 1988, we're in Anaheim, this place called Jezebel's, and Jack is there from Great White.
Yep.
Jack Russell. He's from there. These guys are from Anaheim.
Yep.
And a couple times he came in and sat in with us, but like the first time he comes up and he goes, "Man, you know any Zeppelin? You know any, and we're like, we know one of your songs.
Right.
Stick It. Let's do Stick." And he's like, Stick It? Really? Like they probably hadn't played it in years by then,
Right.
And so yeah, we do the thing. And then we get to that end part and we just go like, suck it, just because it was muscle memory. We hadn't played it in years, and all of a sudden it's just all coming back. And Jack's like, he got into it right away, and he had a ball. It was great. So anyway, that's my Stick It story.
No, that's and don't be afraid to go off on any tangents, because I just want to hear all this stuff. So in Dallas, you guys start to develop a name. Was there any sign of, hey, there's interest in this band, or any label interest, or what was that like? Because eventually you moved to LA, but was there any of that going on when you were playing in Dallas?
Well, not in really that first year.
Sure.
We went to LA the first time like in February of '85. So that first 9 months, we were just really developing the band, getting a following, but we were getting big in Dallas, but we'd go to Houston the following week, and there was even bigger clubs down there that rocked out really hard.
Right.
And we were getting other bands were getting to know who we are, because when you play these larger clubs, and you might be there for 4 nights, right? Well, if they have a national act scheduled in, and it could be like an aging rock star, like John Kay or somebody like that, Steve Marriott, or it's a newer band like Autograph. They had just gotten off their Van Halen tour, and they were just starting to break on the radio. That song, Turn Up the Radio, and they were coming through Houston, and we were already there. So we become the de facto opening band. So we opened up for Lita Ford and, just whatever band was. Black Flag, that was a crazy story.
I'd love to hear
some mismatches.
Yeah, Black Flag, like hardcore punk, a hardcore band. So,
and what happened was, this was in Houston. I don't know, it was 85, 86, something. And it's like, we talked to the club. We go, wait a minute, this doesn't seem like a good idea. It's not the same crowd, right? And so what they did is Black Flag played first in the night. We struck the whole stage. They set up everything, set up the box office, sold the tickets. Their whole crowd went in. They played their set. Everybody left. They cleared the club, reopened the box office for Sweet Savage, changed the marquee, and we played. So we didn't really play together, but we played the same club the same night, right after each other. And I guess rumor was a couple of their guys, fans or whatever, punks, got in line and bought a ticket to see us just so they could, fuck it. But that was Henry Rollins. I mean, that was back in the Black Flag days. So there was funny stories but some of these bands were getting to know who we were.
Right.
So by the time we got to LA, there was actually a buzz about the band, and we had done some advanced things, sent out promo packs, and had a couple contacts, and even label visits on some of those first gigs. But that didn't really happen until we got to LA in early '85.
So what was that decision like? Hey, we're playing Dallas, but we need to go to LA. Like how did that come about in the band? That decision.
Well, it just really became apparent that was the place. It really was. I mean, you knew it was in the '60s and some other things, and you heard about the LA scene, Quiet Riot, all these Motley Crue, all these bands were coming out of LA. Yep. But once Rat, Great White, some of these other bands started hitting, and Dawkins, everything was coming out of there. These were all just great bands, all came out at once. So we knew eventually that's what we would have to do. But by the time I got out there, we easily had, because you don't play 2 sets, you got 40 minutes.
Right.
And it's like a showcase, and it's the next band, and it's the next band, and you got to be on it. Of course, we're all road hardened, and we're playing, those guys play once a month. We played once a night. We played every night. And so, we had the road crew. Of course, we had the amps. We had all that professionalism, like I was talking about on stage. So we came in like an arena act in Gazzari's, in the Trube, in the, all these clubs. It was great to play, but it was really fantastic. But it was an eye opener too, seeing what that scene was and really how concentrated it was. And here's Joey put it the best way. There was all this flyering, all this stuff he didn't have to do because, well, we couldn't do because we were playing one city to the next. We'd send some stuff in the mail, but we were not going to be hanging out weeks on end. Mayor, come see my band next month. But that's what was happening in LA, all this flyering and posting the bills. But Poison, they had their logo and green spray paint. There was a Poison stenciled logo all over Hollywood. And Joey said, when we got to town, we realized they had painted the town Poison. And and this is 85.
Yeah.
So this is, this is before their deal, before the record. They had different guitar players before CC. And we saw them at the Roxy, and they had packed it. And there was, everything. You could just tell right away, okay, they're going to be a big rock star band. Absolutely. We knew Poison was like kind of our new, okay, these are the top dogs. When we come back to LA, this is what we're going after. This is not that it's a competition, but they raised the bar and we're like, okay, if that's the bar, let's go.
So when you get there and you start playing the clubs, was it pretty immediate that you started having a following? Because you said you guys kind of already had the stage show, you had all of that, but most bands you hear about, hey, they got to start off, they're playing, seventh on the bill, and there's nobody there, and they're playing Tuesday nights until they can develop. How soon did it feel like you guys built that name to where you had something going in Hollywood?
It was instant. It actually was, the wave was happening before we got there. And I honestly don't know how there was that much knowledge and buzz. And I don't know who called who. We didn't have a manager or anything like that. But there was this one woman, Lucy Forbes. She knew everybody. She was shepherding us around, getting us the good table at the Rainbow. And this is our first time there, and we're like, holy crap, all this stuff. Took us to Jimmy Bain's house for a party, Dio shows up, smoked all our weed, just all this, and it's like happening right away. And then there's something else the next night. So I was a little overwhelmed with that. A lot of people came out to our Troop show, that first trip. Guys from Warrant, Poison, Carmen Appice was there too. And at the time, our drummer hadn't done the blonde thing yet. He still had brown hair, and we had two guitar players right before we ended up becoming a four-piece.
Yep.
And the rest of us had, the bleach blonde hair. Well, wouldn't you know, about 6 months later, this band called King Cobra comes out, and it's like they had the pink and blue spray in their hair and all this stuff. And it's like that. He was at the Troop and saw us, and he goes, hey, that sounds like a good idea. And it's like he made his own little mini, Now, I know those guys because Icon and the Schoolboys before then, and Phoenix. Later, Surgical Steel was a band that had some of those same guys that maybe didn't go to King Cobra. But so there was always, I kind of knew who they were, but it was kind of funny too that I saw the first promo picture. I'm like,
right.
Well, it was flattering, I didn't care. Plus, by then we had already, we had one guitar player now, just me, and Randy had dyed his hair, so it was, we were done with it by then anyway.
I've always been fascinated by the finances, because you'd hear of bands who would say, yeah, we were really successful on the Sunset Strip, but we were also broke. You seemed like you guys were playing a lot of shows. You were able to have like a road crew. So could you actually, were you actually making money in the mid 80s when Sweet Savage was, maybe even from Texas to LA? Or was it like, hey, you were still kind of, barely getting by?
Well, when we moved to LA, that was a whole different story. That was early 87, and it was definitely a struggle. There's no doubt about it. It was because we couldn't just go play Houston for a week and make $4,000. You couldn't. Right. But what ended up happening is, like in 88, later on, we kind of worked the system out better, where you could only play on the Strip once a month. You didn't want to saturate, and the clubs were frowning. So you'd have a Roxy gig, and then 3 or 4 weeks later, you'd have a whiskey gig booked. Well, what we would do is we would leave. We had a truck. We had all our gear. We would play literally like the next day after, say, like a Roxy gig. We'd get in the truck, in the van. We'd go back to Texas, play for 2 or 3 weeks, make bank, come back, and we're already rehearsed. We didn't have to rehearse. Just plug in. It's another gig. Okay, it's the whiskey. Okay, well, whatever,
Right.
So that seemed to work. And we all kind of found ways we could manage our own affairs as far as rent and living
Yeah.
with somebody.
Right.
Know?
Could I, so
Living
when was it exactly there that you remember that you guys moved to the Suns, moved to California?
That was 87,
Okay.
February of 87. Now, we'd gone back a second time to LA in 85 when it was just me as a guitar player.
Yep.
And that's when we recorded the EP with Dana Strum.
That's what I wanted
And
to
did
get
all
into.
that. That was summer of 85. And that was, I don't know, we were probably there for maybe about 2.5 months. So we learned a lot, and a lot of that was just gearing up for us to moving eventually.
Sure. So how did that come about? The recording of the EP, you get Dana Strum, who probably, maybe a lot of people wouldn't have known about him in 85, but would be, but he discovered got Randy Rhoads in Ozzy Osbourne. So how did that come about, the Dana Strum thing?
He did, and he was also kind of an uncredited, unsung hero in the early Motley Crue days with that first record when they did it on their own, the Leather Records release of Too Fast for Love.
Yep.
I can't say that somebody played somebody's bass parts because I won't, but rumor speculates. But
Sure.
Anyway, he was instrumental in that getting the early push and the recognition that it got, which really, I think, re-kicked the whole. I give a lot of credit to Motley Crue for that whole LA scene. I don't think any other band did as much. There was a lot of other bands, but they were the bedrock, and the people who supported them, like Lucy Forbes and Dana Strum and whatever, it helped really push them. It did so much for the scene, the clubs, the bands, the industry, and really a whole generation or two now since.
Yeah, and I've said, I think everybody kind of wanted to be Van Halen, but they were almost like a mythical figure. But when Motley Crue came out in 81, like, hey, they were on the Sunset Strip. They weren't like, like Eddie Van Halen talented. Like you could dream of being Motley Crue, and they were the first and so far ahead of the game. Anyway, you've kind of gotten
Yeah,
into
they
it, but
did. They had that whole, actually, they got their name from the Troubadour bouncers. Had T-shirts that said Motley Crue, but CREW, and they
sure.
twisted it. But they were like, they were forged in LA, just like we were born in Dallas. They were
Right.
forged in everything that's LA is part of the recipe for the Motley Crue band. But yeah, they really did a lot. So I think Lucy Forbes, she just knew everybody, really supported up and coming bands. I don't know how she got a piece of the action or what it was, but she knew Dana Strum and got us hooked up. He went to one of our gigs and goes, yeah, let's do something. And I think we took out a loan against the truck, borrowed some other money, from somewhere. We weren't really financed. We made it look like we were.
Right.
Some of those extra lights we had got before Sweet Savage, that whole amp line. And even the heads you could plug them in. There was a little switch and a light would come on. We had all the knobs, we had the Marshall logos, 8 heads, 8 cabinets. Lane had all the SVTs and the big cabinets. And again, most of them were fake, but they were real. I mean, they really existed,
Sure. Yeah.
and they really went on stage and you flicked the light on. And that with the truck and the crew, it's all stuff we really paid for and worked for, slugging it out in all the, 5 nights a week, sometimes 3 sets a night early on, doing all that. But we made money and it financed what we had. But we always wanted the illusion of success, because that's what rock and roll is. You want to be different. You want to come out with clothes that people wouldn't be caught dead wearing on the street. You want to have your hair done. You want to have the loud. You want to have the smoke and the lights and the production. And that's what Motley Crue was really good at. They brought a arena concert into the Troubadour. It's that attitude. It's that scope. You're like, hello, and there's 200 people there, but who cares? There's 20,000 in your mind and in your heart. And that's what speaks to people. And that's what I think made the difference. And I think that was one of the things that Sweet Savage really brought to the Sunset Strip, was that we weren't a strip band. We were a club band. We'd played probably 25, 30 states by then. We played in Florida and Baltimore. We played some Grand Rapids, Michigan, some places I probably forgot, Cincinnati. Right. We just played Raleigh, North Carolina, wherever we could play. We had a truck. We just would one gig to the next. So, we were road hardened when we got there, and we really brought, a much bigger show. And attitude, even though we didn't have smoke and the fire and things like that. Our amp line and the way we moved around, the way we commanded the stage. That was like an arena.
When you got to California and you started playing the clubs, and you already mentioned Poison, you said that's going to be it. What other bands were you guys playing with or hanging out with or partying with that, maybe you became friends with and went on to, or do you have any stories about the other bands that you were playing with around that era?
Yeah, so in '85 when we played there, I actually did a gig at Guitarist with London,
Right.
which was Nicky's original band
Yep.
before Motley Crue. And fast forward many decades later, I played with Lizzie Gray in Spiders and Snakes, which was his last band before his time was up. But yeah, and we would play. What's that song? All the Motley Crue songs. People are like, what are you playing a Motley Crue song for? And it's like Lizzie wrote it,
Right.
you know.
Right.
But so yeah, it wasn't until '87 that when we came back and we really moved back, we were playing with a lot of bands then, like Candy,
Sure.
who Gilby ended up. I think he was in that band too, right? L.A. Guns. Pretty Boy Floyd played their first gig opening up for us at the Roxy. That was a big night. There was big ads taken out. It was great. It was a really good night, good rock and roll night. And then we had people sitting in because we had run into those Poison guys. They sat with us in Houston when they were playing. I think they were opening up for Vinnie Vincent, and because of Dana Strum, they came to the club after they were done with their arena show.
Right.
They came up to the club to say hi, and those guys sat in. They would sit in with us and at the whiskey, all that. And there was really a sense of there was a lot of competition, but it was a community, and we all kind of looked out for each other. And it was always fun to sit in with with somebody.
So what happened with the demo? I think the demo gets done in December of '85, produced by Dana Strum. What happens after that? Does that get shopped? Is that when you start getting the label attention? Because we've talked about Poison, and one of the big things that you guys are known for is that the Enigma record label offered you, apparently, and you can correct anything, offered you the contract that you guys turned down that ended up going to Poison. So what was that scene like? The demo gets done. Is that when you start getting like, hey, we're starting to get some record label offers?
Yeah, well, actually, Enigma came to the studio while we were recording it.
Okay.
With an offer.
Sure. Okay.
So,
and I'd love to hear more about that.
Everything else is true. Yeah, but Enigma didn't have Capital Distribution then.
Sure.
They were very, very independent. And at first we're like, take it, anything we got, let's go,
Right.
I was like, I had just turned 21. I mean, it was like, everything's had. So my second time in LA and we're recording at a big studio and the label wants us. I'm like, I'm home, this is it. Yeah. But then we're like, wait a minute, if we're getting this kind of attention right now, let's finish this demo. Let's shop it around. Let's see what else we can get, because it was a really, really crappy deal. It was like $30,000 and no tour support. And I think Poison got even worse. Their management took half. It was terrible. And this isn't really hindsight because it was in my sight at the time. It's like, get something out there quick and dirty. Even if it's a crappy deal, get something out. Ride this wave. It's now. It's happening. And that's exactly what Poison did. Then they were able to renegotiate afterwards because it sold so well. But they did a hell of a job for, because $30,000, I mean, right now, get $3,000 worth of gear and you can record an awesome 24-track thing on your laptop. But back then, $30,000 was crap. For a full length, we probably spent 10 or 12 on our EP, what became our EP, that demo with Dana. But yeah, it was, it was a demo, but early on, actually, I think it was even Dana's idea. He said, what do you guys think about just releasing this as an independent? Because, Rat had their first record and that got distribution. That was that was before I moved to Texas. I was in Ohio and I saw that at a Peaches record store, and it's like, wow, these rats are crawling up this girl's fishnet with the pumps. And it was like, oh, they're and it was like, wow, this is a cool band. Of course, the Motley Crue had done theirs, which I already had. I got that when I was in high school in '82. and Great White. A lot of these bands did that. They did an EP or some independent release that got them sales. Like with the fans, you really get that deeper connection. It's not you're just out because we didn't have MTV, or not MTV. We didn't have YouTube. You couldn't do
Yeah.
all that.
Right.
People had to have the music. The actual thing. So yeah, we did that. Yeah, by the end of the year, by the end of '85, we had started pressing it and sending it out, and it started taking off. All through '86, we basically showcased. A lot of labels came to Texas to see us. We didn't go to LA in '86. The album took off. I was sending them out to Kelv Hellraiser in London at Shades Records, and on the Kerrang charts. See, Poisons came out, in '86 too, and on the Kerrang chart, it's crazy. I'll send you. I don't know if you've seen them, but it's like Sweet Savage, Cinderella Night Songs, Poison, Look What the Cat Dragged In. There was even a Bon Jovi one. These are the imports, and there's only 10 of them. And for like 10 weeks, we were either 1 or 2 or 5, and it just kind of shuffling around that summer. And we're like, okay, this is great. And then that's when we realized, okay, now we got to move to LA. We got to move the whole band. So we worked hard, we played, we showcased, and it wasn't really until we wanted to get there sooner, but it wasn't until early '87 that we ended up fully making the move.
So what happened then? And you get to Hollywood in '87. It's exploding, right? I mean, Poison came out in '86 with Look What the Cat Dragged In.
Yeah.
Slippery When Wet came out in '86. Cinderella came out in '86. I mean, we've talked about there were so many great albums that were released, I think, in 1988 and '89 because Poison on all those, they kind of instituted this big rush to sign everybody with long hair and makeup. So what was it like for you guys in '87? And did you get close to signing the big record contract?
Couldn't have been closer.
Yeah.
We shot ourselves in the foot. Basically, we ended up breaking up when things were going great. Joey left and started his own thing, and then fortunately he came back, and it got even better. But I call that like the second phase of the '80s, of the Sunset Strip, was Poison.
Yeah.
When their album hit, Rat and Crew, that had already happened. '85 was like this mid zone. So we were there kind of at the end of the first phase and really at the beginning and at the height of the second phase. But what happened was when we got there, there was a lot of attention, and we were showcasing again, and this band, Femme Fatale, who Lorraine from Vixen, it was her band back then. Well, they actually had a song out, Looking for the Big One and Waiting for the Big One. They definitely made a mark, but they got their deal from the people that came out to see. They opened up for us at the Whiskey for this showcase. The people we invited out are like, well, I don't know about these guys, but let's look at this chick. So they got their deal at our showcase. Good for them. That's fine.
Sure.
But back then, actually at that time, it seemed like they were handing them out on street corners.
Yeah.
Like, there was always going to be the next one, always going to be the next one. Warrant was starting to get popular then. They were starting, I knew those guys, we were just hanging out and stuff, but their draw was getting good, and they were really a good band in the club. Just, they deserved everything they got. Of course, Janie being a fantastic songwriter, but they did the arena stuff in the clubs too. I mean, they really had their show together. So it was us, Warrant, some other bands playing. But one of the things too, when we came back to move to LA, we had befriended some people when we were doing the record. A lot of people came down to the studio, people I didn't know, people, friends of friends. And so people we stayed in touch with when we got back there, well, they were doing security at this company called Alibi Artists. We knew a bunch of those people. And they were doing security at the Cat House back when it was at the original location. And so we started going there, and we're like, oh, we know the guys. And Ricky Rackman actually managed us for about 2 months. This Alibi Artist, they were trying to get this. It wasn't just security. They put on some great shows. Every show that was at the Roxy or the Whiskey that was huge and sold out, that it was Pussycat, Guns N' Roses, Jet Boy, LA Guns, or Sweet Savage, was an Alibi Artist, and they had their logo on the thing, and it was that really raw black and white, high contrast, almost trashy kind of flyer, and that was a brand, and you knew it was going to be a great show. So they were promoting our show. So we got really good promotion early on. Plus, kind of had lifetime go right through the front door. You don't, no rope, no
Right.
bouncer, no
Right.
ID, cat house. And so we were really in with that. And like I said, some of it I don't even understand how it happened, but it, you know, it just did. And there we were. So we took advantage of it.
So you mentioned Joey C. Jones leaving the band. When did that happen, and what was going on with Sweet Savage that would lead him to go, you know what, I'm going to go do my own thing?
Yeah,
If you can go into that.
it's well, I have to. I mean, it's a baffling mystery. It's definitely part of the story. It was actually that company, Alibi Artists. They wanted us to sign a management deal, and we were kind of like, we really like Ricky, but we didn't like the other guy, and so we're kind of like, we'd never signed anything. We were completely independent. You know,
Right.
you could easily say we were the biggest unsigned band of the '80s. But we didn't have management. Nobody took. We have 100% of whatever we have, but we never gave anything out or away. It was we kept it to ourselves, and maybe we killed it ourselves, but that's what we did. Well, Alibi split. Ricky went. You know, he really just focused on the Cat House, and this other guy, Ed Montez, he was, oh, yeah, we still want to manage you, and I'm like, I don't know about that. And Joey's like, oh no, we should sign this. Well, behind our backs, me and Lane. Joey was talking to this guy, and apparently that guy is like, "Oh, you're the star in Sweet Savage. Just leave those guys,
Sure.
and you know I'll get you a deal, and I'll put you up here." And I think it kind of got caught up in that. Oh, somebody really likes me, or this is. But it was such a betrayal. It was like the ultimate betrayal, because he wasn't just some guy. He wasn't just a singer in the band. I knew him since I was 12.
Right.
You know, it went deep, and it went way back before we played rock. So it was, like I said, it was devastating. And Randy went with him. And he started playing out and doing stuff like that. And we very quickly got hooked up with Walt Woodward, who was in Americade, this Jersey band years ago. He was kind of the cool guy. I thought he was the singer. You know, I saw the Americade record, and it's like, oh no, he's the drummer. But he was in this band called The Sharks,
Yep.
which later changed their name to Shark Island.
Yep.
And around the same time, they did a personnel change, and I think Walt was one of the guys that decided to leave. So we got with him very quickly, and he was next level talent as far as like he do all the John Bonham stuff,
Yeah.
really intricate, really, but and just a powerhouse rocker. But he had another sense, and we rehearsed that whole summer of '87 after Joey split. And we just, you know, 2-3 nights a week, we're just in because they had a lockout room, and we're just in there just banging away, and we're writing songs. It's just 3-piece, no singer.
Yep.
We auditioned a bunch of people, and at one point I ran into those, Randy O from Odin at the Cat House, I'm sure,
Yep.
and he's like, "Mom, my fucking band broke up," and I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "You know what? We're kind of looking for a singer."
Right.
It wasn't quite the right fit. Like, you know, you wouldn't think of that. And he goes, "Yeah, man." So he came out, and we rehearsed for a couple weeks, and we were like, this is different. Like we would have had to change the name of the band, which would have been fine because it wasn't like he was trying to do the Joey stuff. You know, Joey was pretty hard to place because,
Sure.
you know, one of a kind. His voice wasn't really run of the mill. It kind of had its own. Plus, every song I'd ever written for years, it was for his voice.
Right.
That's all I knew, you know?
Right.
But with Randy, it was kind of cool. And we wrote a couple songs together. And then one night he didn't show up for rehearsal. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. And this is, you didn't have cell phones or anything. And
Yeah.
didn't hear from him for about a week or two. And then I ran into one of the Duncans at the house, and he goes, "Oh yeah, man, Gypsy. We just recorded that song." And I'm like, "You recorded Little Gypsy with the one that Randy and I wrote?" Like, you know, okay. And then they did, and then it got on the Metal Years, Decline of Western
Decline.
Civilization soundtrack.
Yeah.
You know, and Randy's like, "Hey man, my band got back together. Sorry." And it's like,
Sure.
and that's all the explanation you need. I'm like, well, hallelujah, you know,
Yeah.
our loss, but wow, that's great. And to his credit, Randy O never asked, didn't track me down, because this kind of happened after the fact with the songwriting credit for Little Gypsy. He, on his own, gave me 40%, which I thought was pretty generous and pretty fair, because
Right.
they actually, I mean, we had it worked out. And what he did is he took one of our rehearsal tapes and gave it to his band. And I think they did the song justice. I think we had our own version of it, of course.
Sure.
But they put it out and they put the money to record it and got it on the record and everything, or the movie. So yeah, I make about $100 a year off that song on that movie. But Randy O, what a gentleman. I mean, that was, but he didn't know my last name. So it was Chris Savage. That's my credit, but the check still clears. So that's all that matters.
So I don't want to rehash like bad memories, but you and Lane and Joey C. Jones, grew up together. You did this whole, what was that like when he was like, I'm out? I mean, was it a horrible, or was it like, okay? See, I mean, I just like to hear about that if you don't mind telling.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a gut punch. I mean, it was on so many levels. It's not just like we lost our singer.
Yeah.
It was the betrayal. It's like somebody, leaving you and then going out with your sister, or I don't know what. I mean, it doesn't even compare. That wouldn't be so bad, but this was bad because it was everything we had done. By then, it was 8 years or more from high school and everything else playing together. This was the dream, and we were living it, and things were going so well. I could see if we didn't have that big a draw in LA, we were kind of struggling. We're not really getting any attention.
Right.
Albums not selling, not really writing the good songs. We're wavering, and time's ticking. This '80s isn't going to last forever. And he goes, man, I got to split. I got to go. I could almost understand that, but we were doing great. We were showcasing. We were selling it. We were the last band to get paid at the Whiskey when they started doing that Paperplay stuff, because they knew we could pack it in. I mean, it was a guaranteed, we're all going to make some money, so they didn't even bother with us with pre-sale. But when eventually Joey did come back by the end of the summer, he was gone for about 3 or 4 months, and he came back, and we're like, at first we're like, this sounds great. And then it's like, I don't know. But we did, and we still had that same rehearsal room. So we brought him in, and we played some of the old stuff that Walt would have known, because he was working on our catalog as well. And I played for Joey some of this new stuff that we had, and he had pulled a couple songs that he did with Pal Joey that Shane Hunter wrote, like Coming On and Summer Song. And I wrote Picture Yourself, and we worked that out. And there was a couple magical moments in those first couple rehearsals that was like, okay, it's worth it. Okay, all forgiven, passes in the past.
Sure.
We were a better band, I think, for the breakup and coming back together, the songwriting, the tightness, and really the preciseness with Walt. And he sang, so there's really good backups, and like I said, just this really next, Randy's a powerhouse and a basher, and really, really great. But Walt was a little more in the groove, so it kind of colored the sound a little differently. But I thought in a different, and I think in a better way, and at least because the band was growing, I felt, and had grown that summer. So when we got him back, things were just even bigger than ever. And we would do the same thing. We'd play the clubs. We'd go to Texas for a couple of weeks. We had police escorts from the dressing room to the stage in Houston.
Right.
Just crazy. It was like we were almost too big for the clubs, but it was a guaranteed good time, and the clubs made money, and people had a blast, and we made money, and great crowds. And the same thing in LA. One of the last gigs we did at the Rocks, or the Whiskey, Brett came, and he and Cece sat in. Janie was there. There's this great picture of Janie, Brett, and Joey that was taken that night, I think backstage after we played. Just phenomenal gigs, because we were setting up for sound check early in the day, and Brett and I think it was Ricky, they were on their Harleys. They were just cruising up the strip, and they saw our name on the marquee, and they pulled in, and they come in, it was during the day. And they came in when we were getting ready to do sound check. And like, you guys playing tonight? And we're like, yeah. And he goes, all right, we'll come out and, kind of sit in with us, do Surrender or something, so they did. So, things were, it couldn't have been better, and Dana was great with, his push and promotion. No, he was then busy with Vinnie Vincent, and then shortly thereafter, Slaughter, which, they really did great. But he was supportive. He usually came out. He came out to, even the gigs that he didn't arrange, with a showcase. So yeah, we were, you couldn't have been more there than there, but we're the ones that pulled the plug. And I take that collectively, even though one person quit, you win and lose with the team.
So when Joey left, he went and formed, and I hate to say this, but Pal Joey is not the greatest band name I've ever heard.
No, it's not even a good Frank Sinatra movie
Oh,
title.
so but and when he comes back, is he like, shit, guys, I fucked up? Or how did that, when he wanted to come back after Pal Joey doesn't do what he thinks it's gonna do?
Yeah. Um, yeah, there was a little tail between the legs, and
Right.
worst decision I made. I'm sorry, forgive me. And he really liked Walt. Really, like I said, I think the band improved
Yep.
considerably musically, and it was, but in the back of our mind, maybe Lane and I had a little bit of mistrust because that
Sure.
first it was such a shock. I mean, it was
Sure.
probably PTSD or I don't even know what because it was everything we were talking in study hall in high school in 1980, dreaming of LA and we'll get a band together and we're gonna, play the Troubadour, and it's like, wow, and then here we are, we're doing it and we're doing it, in a massive way, very, very, profound way. and and then to have it happen then in that way was just so bad. But it was the Mark II version of the band, I think was great. The problem there then, and I knew it then, it's not like a regret because I regretted it in the moment.
Sure.
It's not hindsight. I was right in front of me, is that we didn't record.
Right. Okay.
We played and we played. We had a dozen songs that we were playing that we had never recorded. And then our last recording was like in ’85, and I was already 2 years old. And I kept saying, guys, we got to, let's take a load on the truck. Let's do something, sell drugs. What do we got to do? Because it was kind of expensive and hard to do it then, even a little demo, but
Yep.
just even a crappy 4 track, and it just got shot down. Oh, no, man, we're good. We'll just, work it up at sound check and play it that night. And that's fine if you're doing the club thing, but we really wanted to go to the next level, and
Yep.
because you learn so much when you record,
Yeah.
pick up songs apart, you listen to what everybody else is doing and what you're doing, and if you have enough time, you can really take it to that next level, which is what I wanted. And plus, you have a recording of the song,
Right. Right. And then you kind of mentioned, I think if I understand right, the band split up early '89. Was it, or is that about right?
Yeah, yeah.
88?
I mean, I guess I'd look at my timeline on the second
Sure.
time, but the second time was just the demise. I mean, but the strip was dying by then
Okay.
too. There were signs of it.
Okay.
But it was really the last chance. I think for me anyway, the last band to make it out of LA was Warrant, like in a
Yep.
big way.
Yep.
Now they got their deal before '90. I mean, that's kind of when they hit it around '90. But
Yep.
they were doing great. There's every reason why they should have been as popular as they were. But I think they were the last. Like Cherry Pie was probably the last hot chick, rockin' dude.
Yep.
Look at this woman. Yeah, she's
Yep.
hot. Wow. That which to me is kind of personifies the or exemplifies the '80s. That was sort of the last hurrah of that, and very good, very great song and great
Yeah.
video and everything. If that's the send off, if that's the swan song of the '80s Sunset Strip,
Yep.
so be it. I couldn't think of a better one. So
Was there a point where you realized, shit, it's probably not going to happen? Because I'm looking, you just talked about the picture, Joey with Brett and Janie. It was on the cover of Rock City News
yeah, yeah,
back in the day. And so, like you said, I mean, you guys were right up there with all
yeah,
with these bands that
yeah.
exploded. Was there a point where, for all these years you thought it was going to happen, where you went, it's not going to happen, that leads you to break up?
Well, when Joey quit the second time,
Yeah.
that wasn't a band decision either.
Right.
He had made a personal choice to move back to Texas
Sure.
and live his life there and do that, which is fine. People do, but then why did we do this for 10 years?
Yeah.
Why did we gave up everything
So you guys were still wanting to keep going when he left the second time.
Yeah, but there was more than the signs of that whole genre and the
Yep.
scene. It got out of hand. It got almost too big.
Sure.
They closed down the sidewalks. Actually, one of the greatest clubs was the parking lot of the Rainbow
Right.
at like 1:59 when everyone's funneling out from the clubs and there's 400, 500 people just, oh yeah, how you doing? Smoking cigarettes, where's the after party? Oh, let's find something. Which is this big convergence and all the flyers and everything. I think the city and everybody just had enough
Yeah.
by then. There was just so many people. It was so saturated. And then things started getting dark once they closed down the strip and everyone had to be out. The spirit was gone, kind of the heart. Like I said, it got out of hand, and I guess it had to happen. It had to get closed down. But it wasn't much longer that even the music that was played on the strip, it wasn't the happy fun stuff. It got dark really quickly, 89 even before 90. So to say that grunge killed glam or rock and roll or the 80s, it's not really true. Grunge, the corpse was already rotting, I think.
Yep.
I think it had just eaten itself,
Yep.
and there was nowhere else to go. And grunge was just the natural next thing.
Yep.
The response to all the hair and the makeup and all this, and then they have the flannel and they don't shower. But tell you what, though, I have a feeling some of those grunge bands, they probably spent about as much time working on their look as we did on ours.
Course.
It's
course.
still a conscious choice. You still have to buy this flannel from the
Yes.
thrift store and still has to fit. And
Yes.
it still has about the right holes in it. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It was a different version, but it had to be different. And that I think was the most important thing, that it was a different thing. But glam had kind of killed itself by then. So I don't blame grunge at all. It was just the next thing to fill the void.
Right. Something was going to happen, whether it was
Had to.
grunge or pop
Yeah.
or what, something was going to happen. Could you kind of put me put us in the room when the band ends, Sweet Savage? I mean, was it like, hey, we're all okay, shit, Joey, I'm gone. Okay, the rest of us, we're done. We're not going to get a new singer. That's it. Like, what was that experience? What happened at the end?
Well, we played a club called the Green Door somewhere in Inland Empire, somewhere East LA.
Yep.
And it was that night after that show that he goes, tomorrow I'm going to Texas. I'm out of the band. It was another shock, but we already had the big one first of all. So it was like, okay. We tried a little bit. There was a guy, JJ Steele, came and sang with us for a while. We did a couple of shows, one in Dallas and a couple in Houston, because people still knew us then.
Yep.
But it wasn't, obviously it wasn't the same.
Sure.
It was impossible to replace, and the attempts that we tried, were failed. But I think it was instinct. It's sort of like, okay, we still have the songs, we still have the buzz. If we can just get somebody and get some kind of deal and get some record out there, at least it won't all be for in vain.
Right.
But I don't know where the point was. I think it was after one of those Texas shows that we just knew, because it was a different singer every time. Sometimes we didn't even have a singer, and we just had guests all night, and that didn't go on for very long. Actually, it was a very quick downfall from there. But yeah, and it was mainly Lane and I. It's just like it's not going to happen. The scene's dying out, this genre of music. Because look, the 50s was only like the 50s in the 50s. The 60s was dated. You had a decade. The 70s had a decade of that style of music, that, style of hair and everything. In the 80s, we knew we had ours, and we didn't, think it was going to last forever. So by the end of the 80s, we knew it was just time,
Sure.
by then. And plus the Sweet Savage thing was definitely over. We could have kept something going. Lane got, some local bands together, and, they played around. The strip died, so people went to FM station in the Valley. That was the next part of the exodus before everyone went to Vegas. But it was just, we had it so good and things were so awesome. It was the band I always wanted to be in. As a matter of fact, here's something funny. When those guys from Pantera was sitting with us in Fort Worth, we've never let them sit in at the same time. It could be like three of them. And we had to do 3 songs. So what we did is, say Vinny would sit in, and then Randy or Walt, whoever's with, would go out and
Yep.
watch 3/4 of Sweet Savage with somebody
Right.
who's cut from the same cloth. We all played the
Right.
same clubs for years.
Right.
And then Dime would play and I'd run out to the front. I got to see Sweet
Right.
Savage with Dime. And then Lane would do the same when Rex would play, So that's the closest we ever got to seeing Sweet Savage was when
Sure.
each individual member of Pantera came and sat in with us. But it was everything I wanted to be. And to put a point on it, I think, and this wasn't until years later, I'm at like John Corabi's party somewhere, and Eric Singer's there. I think this was years ago. I think he'd just gotten in Kiss. He'd been with Cooper for a while. And of course, I had known him from Badlands. We played a show with Badlands. It's with Jake and Ray. And, so when you see him, guy I knew, and great guy, super nice guy. And we're at this party and I'm talking to him and he said, I said, wow, that's great. You're in Kiss, you play with Cooper, wow, that's pretty cool. You wind up with some of your things. He goes, yeah, it's actually very cool, but I'll never had what you had in Sweet Savage. And I'm like, well, what was that? And, it certainly wasn't the money or, and we had the girls and the drugs were about the same. But other than that,
Right.
they were on a whole nother level, of course. But, and he goes, you built a band when you were a teenager with guys you went to high school with, guys you went to concerts with, guys you got your driver's license, left home, got laid, got arrested, got drunk, all these rites of passage that happen in your adolescence, in these teen years, when you're listening to this music, the music is speaking to you because that's, let's face it, that's what it is. And you're that age and you're with these guys and you're writing. So it's the Van Halen or, even Aerosmith, some of these bands, Stones even, they knew each other in high school. And he goes, when you have that, you only have one shot at that. And that's it. You can always join some supergroup, but you only get one shot at that. And he goes, you guys had that and you had that to the bone. And it was like, I thought that was really cool. That's one of the things that, when I think about the demise and what could have happened and why didn't we do this and all this stuff, that really stuck with me. And I go back to that and I did. And you know what? It's like we made it in the sense that we did everything that we could.
Yeah.
We also killed it, but we did it. Every step up until that point had been a step up. It had been a step forward and everything like that. And we had, we had really done it and we sold a bunch of records and we're number one and all this stuff. It was 50,000. It wasn't 5 million.
Right.
That we played thousands in front of thousands of people, not tens of thousands of people. But that's okay too. But it was, that can never be taken away. And to have that experience, regardless of how far up the ladder we went, is one to be grateful for, I think.
I wanted to touch on because most people who follow the channel. So I'm a recovering alcoholic. It's no big deal. I got sober many years ago, but you mentioned, and I think I was looking at your X page and you have a sobriety date that is probably around 20 years. We're probably similar. But you mentioned the drugs and the alcohol. And we know, we talked about Jenny Lane. Look at what happened to him at 47 years old. Was there ever a point where the drugs and the alcohol got in the way back in the 80s?
Not for Sweet Savage.
Sure.
I can honestly say that.
Yep.
It wasn't wasn't the money because we didn't get in the money. It wasn't the fame because we had a lot of regional fame. We were big in Baltimore. We were big in Daytona Beach. We were kind of big in Columbus and Right. So we had the attention. We had all this. But the drugs and alcohol. Especially when you're playing. We played in a bar band, and actually, we played a lot of bars. We had a club owner come up to us one time. And he goes, do you know what you're here for? And I said, well, yeah, we're the entertainment. People dance, they rock out, they get sweaty and hot, and they want to drink something. And he goes, no, you're alcohol salesman. You're not entertainment, you're alcohol salesman.
Right.
And we're like, okay, well, if we're selling alcohol for you, So about halfway through our first set, we stopped in between songs. And Joey was the master at talking in between songs. David Lee Roth maybe outpaced him, by not a whole lot.
Right.
You could change the snare drum snare. That takes like 12 minutes. And you would never know we didn't play a song. He just, oh yeah, and I was coming down here the other night and we were talking. He could just talk up a storm. It was fantastic. Sometimes Lane and I would be on stage looking at each other like, what's he going to say next? Oh my God, we didn't even know. There was never any dead air. You know, you never had to kill time. It was always on. So when we stopped, he goes, you know, does everybody have a drink? You know, well, we don't have a drink. And he turned around the bar and he goes, yeah, how about bringing some shots up here for the band? And bartender's like, you know, the last thing they want to do is give the band free booze, you know.
Right.
Oh, okay. So waitress comes up with the thing and he goes, we're going to have a toast, but we're going to wait for every single one of you in here to get a drink and have a toast with us. So they brought the drinks up and then everybody goes to the bar. And then the club owner's like, oh yeah.
Hell yeah.
And we're like, you want to sell alcohol? Give us some alcohol and we'll sell it. You know, we need product, you know, we need it. And then we'd, you know, wait for everybody to come out, sit down in front of the stage on the edge and do our shot and have a drink. So it really became part of the show and part of the thing. But since we played a lot, you know, we were always, you know, we always had another gig and everything. And we didn't get into the super hard drugs like the heroin and stuff that was in LA. That was a whole nother scene that we weren't into. You know, coke, and I didn't, you know, we had tons of coke and, you know, speed. It was just we wanted more energy. I didn't want to, like, you know.
Right.
I never understood the heroin. There was kind of basically two things. There was kind of the bleach blonde crazy, let's bounce off walls. And then there was kind of like, yeah, man, I'm just chilling with the LA guns and a lot of that kind of LA. It was big in LA, but it just wasn't my thing. And we never had to pay for it because, you know, there was a lot of topless dancers, especially in Texas. Boy, was I disappointed when we moved to LA. But, you know, it's next level in Dallas and Houston, just like whatever you've heard or whatever you've seen, it's that times 10. But the thing is, those girls work the same hours. And the clubs would be just down the street because it's usually the crappy part of town where you got the rock club and the strip bar. And they would come up on their lunch break and we'd go to Denny's afterwards. So, you know, we had this, you know, connection with all these strippers, and you know, they were fun and young and they probably danced to the same song that we covered that night, you know, but they knew the guys that had the blow. Right. They knew those guys and they wanted to hang out with the girls, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, I'll bring a couple of my friends. So, you know, I'm hoovering up you know, rails of Peruvian flake longer than my forearm. And never paid a dime because it was just always, it was just part of the whole thing. And then once the band got more popular, you know, some of those guys that had all this stuff, you know, would come to see the band. They just wanted to hang out with the band because if you hung out with the band long enough, the girls would come in. So it just all kind of worked out. But it wasn't, you know, we were really good at partying very, very hard and then getting up the next day and doing it again. More than once, there was a bucket next to the drum throne on the riser in between songs, you know. It's just, you know, but we were professionals. We always made it to the gig, always showed up, always played the best that we could, you know, that night, no matter how screwed up we got. So I think we were just seasoned and we had high tolerance for that. We knew our drug, we knew our limits, but it ate up a lot of people. And we also, I think, quit too. Like when the scene died and the band died, we didn't like keep on drinking like crazy. For us, it was part of the scene, the party, the band, the club, the vibe, the after party, you know, the before party. You know, it wasn't sitting in a room by yourself and just getting hammered, you know. That was, and I didn't get in the depths of, you know, depression or despair to go to that. Now, fast forward years later, I got to where the medicine wasn't working anymore. I got to where a couple of shots of scotch at night would not put me to sleep. You know, Kahlua in my coffee in the morning, and nothing's working, nothing's happening. I'm just as messed up in the head, or you know, whatever's going on. And fortunately, this was '05. I had dated a girl for a couple years who was in and out of the program. Well, mostly out, but I at least knew about the program. I had most of the steps memorized, and by then, but when I finally dragged myself in there, it was definitely bottomed. It was late '05, and I was angry, and I was visiting my mom in Ohio, and it wasn't that I was in a drunken rage. I was just and I had this internal rage or frustration. It wasn't about the band or even hurting my back or anything. It was just life, whatever. And
Sure.
mid 40s, and I punched a countertop from like a countertop. I don't know if you can see it, but this knuckle's a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit lower than the other
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And oh my hand, I broke my. I use a wheelchair, so in a manual wheelchair. So I'm trying, using my elbow, my fingers up. I couldn't do this. I had to go to the doctor, and they set it in a cast. And I just said, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
And that night, I drove myself down to a meeting, and it was in a church basement. This was winter. It was snowing. Well, the snow was melting, which is even worse than snowing because it's wet. So I had to scoot down these outdoor stairs on my butt, dragging my wheelchair and throw myself back up in the wheelchair, pushing the door open. I'm here for the meeting. And the guy, there's like 4 guys at the table, and they're like, we were just finishing up here. The meeting was at 7 and I'm there promptly at 8. And it's like, oh, but they stayed for the hour and never looked back. So that was my sober date, December 28th, 05. So it's been what, 19 years,
Yeah.
2 months, 3 weeks and 2 days, but who's counting, right?
Right. July 4th, 2004.
Congratulations, man. There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't rock and roll. It wasn't the band years. It wasn't,
No.
the injury or anything like that. It was just at a point in my life, and I had to take it out of the equation.
Yeah.
I mean, I could never use it as an excuse.
Yeah.
It was never a reason. It was never going to be a crutch or something I was trying to chase that I would never catch. Because it was that kind of drinking. I actually saw Janie at a couple meetings in LA when he was in and out. I think one at the NAMM show. He lived nearby me. I was living with James Kotak and Athena, his wife at the time. Rest his soul. Oh my God, I can't believe Kotak passed away.
Yes.
But yeah, and Janie lived down the street. So, we'd get together every now and then. I saw him and I knew he was struggling, and it's so tragic. And there's just a point at which, I'm sure people, I mean, there's just nothing that you can do. You have to want it yourself.
Yep.
And, anybody out there that's struggling, I mean, there's no dishonor in giving up the bottle. I mean, we shouldn't be doing it at this age anyway. Oh my God, it's for the youth, if at all, but it's not necessary. You can live without it. You can be just as fun. I still love going to clubs. I still like hanging out with people. I just don't need the alcohol or want it, or at this point even crave it. And it's helped me with my life, not to just not drink, but to, actually live a fuller life. And I recommend the program. Anybody, I'll sponsor you if anybody's struggling, but you don't have to do it alone. I mean, really, it's, but there's nothing you can do. It's so tragic to see somebody fall apart. I wasn't hanging out with Jeannie all the time, but enough times, even played a gig with him. Athena was sick and he played drums actually.
Right.
Last time I played with Janie, he was playing drums, and James Kotak, the drummer, was singing. So it was a big mess. But congratulations on your sobriety.
Thank you.
Keep coming back. It's an amazing journey.
I appreciate you going into that. And if it's okay, because you mentioned, I said that you got into an accident when you were flying. I didn't get into that. Yes, you are in a wheelchair. Could you, so the band breaks up in 89. I know that your accident happened. Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Hey, looking good.
Little wheelie. Yeah. All right.
The accident happened in 91. The band breaks up in 89. Could you, what happened in those 2 years after Sweet Savage Ends that leads up to the accident?
Yeah, well, that was, again, like I said, the scene, the whole genre, the strip, all that stuff was kind of, I hate to say it was dying anyway, but it really was. And there was no point in trying to get a Sweet Savage thing together. Lane was working on a band. Actually, it was Anna Cartwright, who designed a lot of clothes, a lot of Lita Ford, Bon Jovi, this band called Brunette. She did Sweet Savage stuff, really great. She's like top notch on the strip, and that really custom look, really, really great. A friend of hers was a screenwriter. And, I wrote a little in high school, or, certainly song wrote. And well, that's interesting. But what was interesting really was that here's a thing you can do that's creative, and you can do it yourself. No one's gonna leave you and break. I need like a breakup free career or something.
Right.
But I dabbled in that and got a good introduction into film and the office where I worked for him because I just had to get into something. It was nice that it was something completely different. It's not that I actually tried out for uh, Lizzie Borden. They were looking for a guitar player, but I was kind of half-hearted in my approach because it wasn't Sweet Savage. There was
Sure.
nothing. I could have joined any band and it wouldn't have been Sweet Savage.
Right.
But anyway, so I'm getting into film a little bit, at least the writing part, and the office was right by the San Monica airport. And seeing the planes and everything, and it was like my dad flew when I was a little kid. That was like the babysitter. He'd throw me in the back of the plane. We didn't have a plane, but he was a flight instructor on the
Sure.
weekends, his second job. So I knew a bit about that. My brother and I are big into World War II aviation and, the whole, Mustangs and Spitfires and everything. And so it had always been an interest, and it just took me over. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to sell some of my guitar gear. I don't need 8 Marshalls. I kept, half stack, and
Right.
so I sold some of my gear, and I wanted to learn how to fly. It was something I probably eventually would have done anyway. But this was, again, it was solo. Here's something you do by yourself, and it's your skill with the plane. And I was way sober then. I mean, didn't even smoke weed, didn't drink, I didn't even smoke cigarettes, nothing. It was just, when I got out of it, I got out of it because it was toxic. For
Sure.
me,
Sure.
emotionally, So to do something different like film that's still creative, something like flying that's a challenge and kind of hardcore and kind of in its own kind of way, I was up for it and I took to it right away and learned how to fly. I got my license. And then it was kind of like, well, I wasn't going to be a career pilot. I was almost 27 at the time. And, just trying to, I accomplished the goal. I was kind of done with it and was still hanging around the airport, flying when I could. I was working at the flight school to pay for flying time and,
Right.
things you do. And yeah, and then I had the opportunity to fly at an air show, and it was flying an experimental plane designed by Burt Rutan. He's got the Virgin Galactic, the same guy that designed the ship that goes up. He did the Voyager that went around the world on a tank of gas. Just a kind of a really eccentric aircraft designer, and this very sporty plane. It looks like an X-wing fighter. It's got the canard in front, the wings, and the tails in the back, the prop in the back, little bubble canopy. You kind of wear it. It's like a
Yep.
fighter plane, and these guys were kind of the south side of the airport, so to speak. They were kind of the renegades and everything. Of course, I took to that. But yeah, and I was got to fly some cool places and hang out with some cool people. And this was my first attempt and my last attempt at a ribbon cutting contest. And what they do is they drop a streamer out from a plane in front of you. It's actually, of all things, a roll of toilet paper with
Right.
3 paper clips attached to the end so it unfurls. So
Yeah.
they drop it out of the plane in front of you and it unfurls, and you've got, 100 feet, I guess, of toilet paper. And you make passes at it as it comes down. You cut it with your wing. And then when it gets to 1,000 feet, that's the hard deck.
Yep.
It's not hard yet, but
Right.
that's watch Top Gun, right?
Yep.
It's the hard deck, and I went in for my third cut. I was low and slow, and I saw the ribbon. I'm like, okay, full throttle, pull back on the stick, went up, got the cut. Knew it was my third one. I was right at the 1,000 above ground. So I pushed the nose over because I didn't want to stall out, and the
Yep.
nose would not go down. It just stayed like this. And I don't know if you've ever driven on freshly packed snow, like that really fluffy white stuff where it gets quiet and the steering is really mushy, and it's kind of, oh, that's kind of nice for a second, but it's also terrifying because you're completely out of control, which was the same thing. So the plane aerodynamically quit flying. The engine was still going. I thought it was this, I thought it was that. What do I do? I could not get out of this deep stall that it's called. The nose just would not come down. I couldn't scoop out of it. And I called a mayday on the radio, and this other pilot came on, and who was up there, with me, in another plane, and he goes, what's the problem? What's wrong? And I said, this is not good. It was, I totally said the Top Gun line.
Right.
You know, when he's getting ready to bail out. Of course, I couldn't bail out because the propeller's behind you.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do it anyway. So, but that was, I didn't call the Mayday, and that's usually the last thing you do. Sometimes it's the last thing you say. And I did. And, you know, of course, I was at the airport. It was an air show. It's not like anybody had to find me, you know. And you know, a lot of people saw it, and I came down, hit the ground. I was conscious for the whole thing. I heard the thud, and just a crazy, crazy experience. I had kind of a spiritual experience between Mayday and Crunch. I saw a vision, heard a voice. I felt like I consciously decided to stay. This disembodied voice, do you want to live or die? And I'm like, what? I was more like, what the heck is that voice? Because first of all, I thought there's no way I'm going to live.
Yeah.
I mean, because I had no control, and it's kind of coming down slow, but straight and level. It's not spinning or tumbling. It's just mushing in. It's called. And then I heard the voice again. Do you want to live or die? Come on. And I'm like, oh, okay. I know I'm going to crash a plane, but I decided to live, and I felt very protected the rest of the way down. You know, even when I hit, it was just crunch, and I knew I broke my back right away because it hurt right there.
Yep.
I saw pictures of the plane crash later. The part where I broke my back, that part on the seat back was fiberglass, and that was crunched.
Yeah.
So the plane really absorbed a lot of the impact. Yeah, I knew I had broken my back. I've been in a wheelchair now for over 33 years, but I use a manual wheelchair. It didn't affect anything.
Yeah.
I didn't even, you know, chip a tooth or any, you know, or get
Right.
cut. It was just
Right.
that was just that part of my back, but it was
Right.
the only bone I broke. And you know, and I knew right away I was playing guitar in the hospital. But the funny thing now, I guess I can laugh now, is, you know, not only do a lot of musicians die in plane crashes, and actually John Denver was killed in the same kind of plane a few years later,
Yep.
Long Easy, different event, and it's not that the planes are necessarily, but it's like giving a 16-year-old a Corvette. You know, I had a couple hundred hours as a pilot, and you don't really give them the
Right.
no,
Right.
I wasn't ready. Maybe I wasn't ready for it, but however it happened. But, you know, so here I am, I crash a plane, and I had my 27th birthday in the hospital a couple weeks later. So the 27 Club, the plane crashed.
Right.
I tried them both at once. It was like, and I didn't die. Yeah, I got crippled, you know, I'm wheelchair or whatever, you know. Honestly, it hasn't affected my life. It hasn't affected my love life or my playing.
Sure.
I still make dumb decisions.
Right.
You know, I got sober on wheels, which is fine. But it was, so, you know, 27 Club, plane crash. And it's like, I wasn't famous enough, you know, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I guess that's another caveat to the Sweet Savage not making it big time. I guess I wasn't, but sort of famous because,
Right.
you know, I did get hurt pretty bad.
Yeah.
So,
After the accident, and were you devastated? You did talk about kind of a spiritual thing happening. Was it easier to accept? I gotta imagine there had to be a ton of things going on in your life and in your head after
Yeah.
you find out that you broke your back and you're paralyzed.
yeah, it was, you know, it's a mixed, you know, a lot of mixed feelings, you know.
Sure.
I kind of felt, oddly enough, I felt like I had, because, you know, it's like a statistical probability that one in so many people get a spinal cord injury or something like that, you know. So I sort of became a statistic in that sense, and I felt like I failed, or I, you know, didn't get away with it or something
Right.
like that, you know, that, okay, you caught me, you know. But once I got over that, it was right away. Like I said, I knew in the hospital that I could, you know, still my manhood, everything worked.
Right.
You know, I could play guitar, you know, the kind of the two big
Right.
ones at the time. You know, so that was good. My family, you know, I mean, I was still here. Like I
Yep.
said, there wasn't a brain injury. There wasn't all this other stuff. Yes, it got me in a wheelchair, but that's about it. And I know that's a big one, but, you know, driving, playing, I've played in Japan with Kotak. I mean, I've toured. There really isn't, and other than like playing hacky sack or walking on the beach, and I can still get to the beach. There really isn't anything that I can't do. So that's always been with it. For everything I can't do, there's 10 I still can, and probably 10 more I haven't tried yet.
Sure.
But yeah, it was an adjustment. And as far as playing goes, I found it was really hard to play in a wheelchair because the guitar kept clanking on the wheel, and then you had to like sit. And some guitars, V's not going to work.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting a drum throne because I was like, okay, who's going to play rock and roll sitting down? And I'm like, drummers do. They do it every night. So, okay, so I get a drum throne, and I have enough strength where I, kind of scoot up and sit on the drum throne.
Sure.
And then, it moves. I can sling the guitar low. I can, do all that stuff. So yeah, it's staying in one spot, but that really helped, So
Right.
you just find a new way to do old things or find new things to do. But health wise, everything else, really haven't had anything else going on. I'm,
Sure.
pretty happy and healthy, and I just happen to do it on wheels. That's really it. That's big, but that's it. If that makes sense.
Right. Right. So what happened in the years after I know you talked about playing with Kotak. I know you played with Spiders and Snakes, which was Lizzie Gray from London's band after in the later years. So I'll take as much as you want to give. Like, what happened? The accident happens in 91. You played in some bands. I know you went to college, I think, and you did a documentary called Walk This Way.
Right.
What are some of the highlights of those years after the accident?
Well, it took me about a year to kind of recover between
Yeah.
3 months in the hospital and just kind of getting used to moving and living in the world, and on wheels. And finally, then I was able to drive again about 10 months later, which was great. That was a big life changer to be able to drive again by myself, because you get good parking spots, but you're not a handicapped driver. When you're on the road at 3 a.m, with all the trucks, you're on your own. It doesn't matter what you do in your spare time. You're driving a car. So, and I just love driving anyway. So that was a really big thing. And then I went to college, and about a year after posting, I enrolled, and you're studying, you're sitting down, you're eating, you do. I became very aware of how much we do sitting down anyway, especially like the more modern things got, remote controls and ordering food. And, it used to be you had to get up and go to the phone, or you had to get up and change the TV channel and do all this crap in the 70s. But life seems to be more and more geared for people to do less and less, and more sitting. Of course, now you have to with the computer and everything. You can't get away with it. You got to edit, you have to record, you got to do all these things. So it was, in some ways my life didn't change at all, the sitting down parts. But college was great. It was a great equalizer. I got to, explore some things. And, I read books and stuff when we were on the road. It wasn't just partying. I had some other interests, and Lane's really smart, very well read. We used to call him Lane the Brain. He's good on Jeopardy, all these things. So it was a challenge, academically, and I got to explore things like making film, and I did. I made a couple short films, and then I did a documentary my senior year, and it was just really kind of all the I was doing stand-up or sit-down comedy really at the time too. I just immersed myself in anything. I signed up for Pep Club. Okay, I'm in. Whatever.
Right.
Just to have stuff to do. And the comedy was great because there's just a lot of how it is with anything it can be troublesome. You have to find the humor, or you're going to be miserable.
Right.
And it's fun to share the humor, especially with the wheelchair, because you need an icebreaker. And I was always joking, like waiting for the elevator and the standing up people. And, oh yeah, I guess this is going to take all day. Or, couldn't you take the stairs? Or, just to kind of break the ice. And then I, got the comedy going. And that seemed to work into the documentary. This personal documentary was, I knew it would be sort of a sarcastic or at least a humorous take on something that's serious.
Yeah.
And I had shared my story so many times by then, even in college, when you write a paper or do a speech or tell us something about yourself, I'd kind of talked about it a lot, and I figured, well, I just put it all in a film, then I can just share this with people. And it was a way of kind of getting it all together and sorting it out for me. And it did really well at the film festivals. And this was back when, you had to shoot on 16 millimeter film, and
Yeah.
I had to mail it out to LA to be processed and wait for it to come back. And then I could see what I did wrong. And editing was, you literally had to cut the film with a razor blade and
Right.
tape it together and put it all back together. And, oh, that's the wrong spot. Take it all to, it took hours, to
Yeah.
do what would take minutes on a computer. But I was into it, and it was fun, and it was a way to get that out. But the only way to share it or show it was at film festivals.
Yeah.
There was no market for short documentaries in 1990. Well, what was it?
6.
97, I think. 96 is when I finished, and the 97 is when it really did well at the film festivals. And then I found I was up for a Student Academy Award. They have a student category for the Oscars, and it was Spike Lee, Robert Zemeckis, from Forrest Gump, the guys from South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. A lot of people had won these awards, and they didn't give like a whole bunch of them. I think there was only 8 or 9 my year, 97, that I won the best student documentary. So it was, I'm in it, and I made it, and it's really about my story. So it kind of hit a lot of things. And then I felt like I was kind of done with that. Like, that's okay. I did it. I don't need to do the comedy. I don't need to talk about this anymore. And that's when I started getting back really I moved back to LA actually in 97, and started playing with friends. I backed up Astrid Young, Neil Young's sister, on some acoustic shows, Aaron Hamilton, some other, a lot of girl singers I did some backup for, and jammed. And that's, started going back out to the clubs again, and seeing the old guys, and Tammy and those guys. Tammy Down needs to be recognized for, I was talking about Dime kept the lead guitar, the guitar hero, alive at a time when it was really, really not happening. Well, LA rock scene was not happening in the late 90s at all. But Tammy was out there every week. He had his Pretty Ugly Club, and he had the Newly Deads, and Danny had his Motochrist, and there were some bands playing. It was very kind of almost like undergroundy, but it was the fun stuff and the long hair, and playing rock and roll. So I got back in with those guys, and hung out, and started playing again. And then that's when I was way drinking, way partying.
I was wondering.
It was like for, I guess when I got back into it, it triggered all the other stuff too, but it wasn't fun party. Like, it was like, that kind of not fun party.
Yeah.
But you still found out who had the blow. You still found out where the after party, it's just amazing. You could put it away for so many years, and it's there any minute. That's why you never let your guard down.
Yeah.
It's a constant thing, as soon as you get comfortable, that's when you should be worried. But it almost took me aback. It's like, holy crap, and it's like Monday night, acoustic night at the Coconut Teaser. And, people are get their 2 folk songs in, and I did my 2 songs, and la-di-da. Well, of course, the sound man has speed, and then I'm up all night.
Right.
And I was a temp at Disney at the time. And then they call me in the morning, and here I am. I'm still practically up, and I'm sweating. I smell like booze and speed and who knows what else. And I got to, I'm like an executive secretary filling at Disney on the lot, and it's like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like sweating it out. Like that was a problem. And I ended up going back to Ohio to visit my mom, and it was, maybe that gave me a little perspective. I got out of my world, but the alcohol came with me, and I'm like, holy crap. And that's where I got mad and wound up my first night.
Right. So could you briefly go into, you said you were in James Kotak's band, which was just called Kotak, and he was the singer. And I actually have a Kotak CD. I think it was called Therapy or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And it was, if I remember right, kind of pop punk. I haven't listened to it for a while, but
he described it as Green Day meets somebody on a bad day. It's kind of punk, kind of kind of pop, kind of cool too. I had known James for a long time. I first met him at the Alrosa Villa. I met a lot of people, but before I moved to Texas, Twisted Sister, Madam X, a lot of these bands would play. Everyone played the Alrosa, and he was in a band called Buster Brown out of Louisville.
Okay.
And of course, talked to him afterwards. Hey, yeah, Chris, whatever. And then a couple years later, he's on the Texas circuit with that band. I ran into him at Savvy's in Fort Worth, and oh man, how's it going? Yeah, yeah, Buster Brown, you guys are doing great. And then a couple years later, I'm in LA, and I ran into him again. I'm like, what are you doing here? You still doing Buster Brown? He goes, no, I got this band now, Kingdom Come. And he's got that really raspy voice. And he goes, come on, play us some. And he went into his car, didn't have any vocals. It was just, the band playing and everything. And I was like, wow, that sounds like Zeppelin, but really good. Great production. And of course, Kotak was a great, huge Bonham fan. And Danny Stagg, great guitar player, really good blues player. Really good band. I was really stoked to hear it. And so we stayed in touch and all this thing. And fast forward, it was within my first year of sobriety. I got again, stayed in touch, but kind of got a call out of the blue, said, hey, what are you doing? You playing still? And it's like, well, we need a guitar player. And I'm like, well, okay. And it's his wife, Athena, and Rev Jones from, he played with Michael Schenker for a long time.
Okay.
He's got that kind of flea look with the dreads and crazy tats and everything. Really spaz good in a good way, bass player, blah, 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 stuff. Just fun band, but they were so party. I mean, James and Athena wow, they were doing it up like it was the 80s. And this is like 07 or something like that. And I'm in my first year of sobriety, or 06. And I'm in my first year. And that was a test, I guess. I mean, to be around them and just, falling in. I was living in their house, it was every night, but it also made me, this is definitely something I don't want to be doing. I don't mind being around it. I'm not going to judge people who do.
Yeah.
But it was not the thing. But they had some buzz, the Kotak band. Certainly being, the well-known drummer in Scorpions at that time. He just kept, moving in these bands. And Athena got a little buzz being Tommy Lee's sister.
Yep.
Of course, don't call her Athena Lee because that's not Tommy's last name.
Right.
It's a bass. Just Athena. She's like Cher. It's a one word.
Yep.
So if you run into her, just call her Athena. Fun drummer. When she was into it, if she wasn't into it, she was always a little bit off. But I think it really depends. They have a relationship, so it's great being a band with a married couple, even if it's those two. But that was fun. We played in New York, Mexico City, because what we would do is in Japan. We played Tokyo. We were in Japan for 2 weeks. We would latch on to a Scorpions gig. So when he was playing New York City at the Beacon with Scorpions. They booked a show down in Chelsea at some club, and he did a Scorpion set, and then we all cabbed it down to wherever, and Greenwich Village or someplace, and then we played that night. Did the same thing in Mexico City and the same thing in Tokyo because figured that he was already there. Athena could go for free. Latch on with him, the Scorpions band would pay for that. So all we really needed were 2 tickets for me and the bass player. Right. And we flew, out to Japan and did those gigs. But that was a lot of fun. It was, like I said, they were in the height of the partying. So I wasn't having that fun, but I was glad I wasn't.
Yeah. And I mean, James's downfall has been attributed. I mean, there was a lot of, at the end, some video evidence of him struggling playing on stage. So, I mean.
Well, he got fired from Scorpions for drinking in Dubai or some country where they don't appreciate that.
Right.
And, it's tragic and it's sad. It's not that much of a surprise that he did a knuckleheaded thing, but to be that far, again, like Janie, and of course they were hanging out at the same time, to be that far taken in by it or taken out eventually.
Well, James was in Warrant for a period when they did the Ultraphobic album. Yeah, but he wasn't.
About that.
I saw them many times. He didn't tour with them, but he apparently, he joined. They recorded the album. He's in the album liner notes, but I never saw him play with Warrant. Anyway, that's kind of off topic, but
no, that brings them together again. You know.
Yeah.
But
so how long did the Kotak experience last for you?
About a year and a half, maybe.
And what brought about, did they just decide it ran its course?
Yeah, I think they wanted something new, and then I moved out of their house,
Sure.
and um, it just wasn't. It was really kind of hard to keep a gig together.
Yeah.
Between their fighting or the alcohol or something. I mean, it was like a miracle we pulled it. Actually, we played the gig. We showed up and played it. We played all
Right.
the songs. We made it through the set.
Yeah.
Yay. Yeah, it was fun while it lasted. I think if they'd had a little more together, like in their personal lives, I think musically and songwriting, and plus with everyone James knew, there would have been every reason why that band could have, recorded and somebody,
Right.
a name person, produce or be involved with, because he hung out with those people all the time.
Yeah.
So again, just another deep tragedy. It's these singers between Joey and Lizzie Gray. He passed while I was in a band with them, and so for those
Well,
of us that are still here, I'm really grateful and really
yeah.
glad that that's the case. But how about that? I mean, how about these bands that are playing now? This is like a miracle. Like these last few
Oh,
years, it's like, I don't know, Twilight Zone or something. If you
yeah.
if you had a band and a song 40 years ago, you're on tour now. You're
Yeah.
playing Monsters of Rock, you're going to Europe.
Yep.
And if you got one guy, well, you got one guy left in the band,
Yeah.
and everyone's over 60.
Yeah.
And the ones that are out there still doing it, they look great, they sound great,
Yes.
they're playing great, and they're hungry. I mean, I've seen, Lita Ford, Wasp,
Yeah.
and Great White, Slaughter,
Yeah.
all these bands over the last couple of years, and every single one of them is like they're hungry and they're like in your face and they're sweating and they're
Yeah.
having a good time, and they're not, oh yeah, we used to do this 40 years ago and we're just sandbagging. It's like,
Right.
we didn't know that back then.
No.
We didn't know you could be 40 and play rock and roll, or would even want to, or anybody even want to see you, much less 60. I remember in '86, Hail Hail Rock and Roll came out. It was about Chuck Berry's 60th birthday party. Bill Gazzardi was 60. That
Yeah.
was ancient. And then
Yes.
Clapton shows up and he's like 43, and he's like, oh, yesterday's news. All these
Yeah.
has-beens are coming up. And Keith Richards, oh my God. You know, then this was '86 when Stones got their Lifetime Achievement Grammy, which is what you get at the end of your career
Yep.
after you've already done it all. And this is it's your grandfather clock, your gold watch when you retire. How thank you for the music. 40 years later, they just won another Grammy,
Yeah.
and they're out there doing it. I thought the Stones were old in 1984.
Totally.
40 years later, they're like the poster child for eternal youth.
And
Like, how did that happen? But Lita looks great.
yeah.
Everyone sounds good. Their throats are great. I mean, I know Bon Jovi's having some trouble, but anyone who's out there doing it they're doing it. They're doing it in a meaningful way. It means something. They're not
Totally.
just doing it to relive old times or they owe somebody money. It's part of your life.
Yeah. So you look like you haven't barely aged. I mean, you look tremendously young.
Oh, thanks.
Have you, has there been any opportunities? Have you looked to join any bands? I would imagine maybe there's been some offers down the road, and maybe you can't go into the specifics, but what has been the music situation with you over the last however many years since you did Kotak and all the other stuff?
Yeah, not enough.
Okay.
It's been really thin. I'm available. Anybody
Sure.
listening? I have gear, I have chops, I have looks. I'm ready to
Yeah.
go. I feel like I'm missing out. I mean, really, because I mean, if Joey were still around, my brother was still into it, we would have been on Rocklahoma and one of these
Sure.
crews, like any of these other bands.
Sure.
Why not? But yeah, to join up. I mean, I think I'm at the point now. I probably ought to just come up with my own thing. I've been working on that, and maybe a
Yeah.
three-piece power trio or something like that, or as well, maybe a Sweet Savage tribute band. I wouldn't call it Sweet Savage, maybe Street Savage or Street
Right.
Sewage or something like that. But I could be like the guy, but I wouldn't want it to be Sweet Savage. It would be like a Sweet Savage tribute band.
Yeah.
Just to happen to have a guy that knows a little something about it. Because I mean, I think those songs are still worth listening to and worth playing, especially all of those ones we didn't record that, nobody's heard in 40 years. But yeah, no, I'm ready to get out there and ready to play, and I've been working on some songs. And if there's a problem, it's my fault. I haven't been working hard enough, or
Right.
something. But this is great talking about the stories. I think that's helping me get like,
Absolutely.
it's still there. It didn't really go away. It was hibernating for a couple decades, but it's back full force now, and it's fantastic.
I'm assuming that you had some run-ins with Stevie Rochelle and Tough back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Stevie and
Oh,
I are chat on Facebook. He's said he's going to come on. We're just trying to work out the schedule.
oh,
But
you got to have him on for sure. Yeah.
I mean,
No,
that
he
guy's
knows
made a
me well.
living off of the What Comes Around Goes Around out, and then he started Metal Sludge, but he and Tough are still touring.
Yeah.
And I would
He
imagine
kept it
that
going. He's another
totally.
one with the Metal Sludge. I mean, there was nobody doing rock journalism in the early 2000s or
Sure,
whatever.
sure.
He definitely kept that going. Funny story about Tough. Um, Tough played, I think, one of their first gigs opening up for Sweet Savage in Phoenix
Okay.
in 1985. I think this was our second going to LA trip in 85. They were five-piece, different singer, two guitars, all double leads, all Queensryche and Maiden. It was George and Todd,
Yeah.
but all the other guys were different, and they were kids. I mean, they were way underage, and we just snuck them in the back door. And we said, they were friends of friends that we were staying with, and it's like, well, shit, why don't you guys just open up for it? Okay, and they like, get it together, and we rehearsed, and they played. But so yeah, I've known those guys for a long time, and they were. Funny thing is when they finally got their deal in the late 80s. There was a two-page spread in Rock City News that hell froze over finally or something like
Right.
that, because it
Right.
was sort of like, but Pretty Boy Floyd and Tough and those, they all deserved a shot too.
Yeah.
Some people would say, well, they weren't the A-list bands or whatever,
Sure.
but they were doing it and they had songs and they worked as hard as anybody else. So, they all deserved a shot. And that's great. Stevie's got Tough back. I know at least Todd's still wetting the drummer, right?
Yep, and I know George is not, but Michael Lean is starting
Michael's back.
to play shows with him again. So,
Nice.
but anyway, like they're playing, they play these cruises, and I would think that if you got something together,
Yeah.
you would have those opportunities, like some of those other bands that were, successful on the strip, maybe not nationally, but those opportunities would be available to you.
I'm ready for it. Maybe I have to make make some of
Right.
the opportunities, but you're gonna help me get a little more visibility out here, being on your show,
Absolutely.
and I'm also very, very inspired. This helps me. It's like therapy because, like I said, I've had some singers die
Yeah.
these last few. Joey, I mean, I moved to Texas and he got diagnosed, and I spent the last 6 months of his life with him until the last six out. I mean, right up, and Lizzie,
Yep.
died on me. That's why I was even brought into Spiders and Snakes because he couldn't play leads anymore,
Yep.
and then he couldn't play guitar anymore, and I'm playing all the parts, and then he had to sit on a stool and sing, and it was just piece by piece. But to his credit, he kept doing it. I mean, you gotta love that somebody working hard till the end.
Yeah.
And then of course recently James again, but it's just
Yep.
sort of I'm like I've been I want some good thing. I want some good new
Totally.
memories to kind of
Totally.
continue the saga. It's not done written yet.
Did you and Joey, I mean, I'm assuming you said that you were there at the end. You must have reconciled everything, after Sweet Savage. I mean, you must have stayed friends, or did you guys ever, was it ever like pretty, shit, I don't want anything to do with you, or did you
Oh
guys
yeah.
always kind of stay amicable?
No, it was absolutely I have nothing to do with you.
Sure.
I would like to strangle you. I would like to do anything I can to harm you.
Yeah.
Funny, I wanted to kill him years ago, and then I ended up spending the last months of his life and the last hours of his breath with him. That happened over time. There was many years where I didn't. After I hurt my back, he was, he called and checked in and everything. That's when, again, pre-internet. And it was maybe 2000, 2001, around there. We got back in touch, and we ended up doing a reunion gig in '09.
Yeah.
but that ended up being a disaster too. He was drunk and he just had this sabotaging way of harming himself and
Sure.
his career. Everyone else was like collateral damage. I don't think he did anything, even I felt betrayed. He didn't do anything deliberately to me. It was him doing something to himself or protecting or through fear or I don't know what. And it may just always be a mystery, but we did reconcile. And in those last months, we spent a lot of time, just me and him together. Because, I visit him in the hospital if he's in the hospital or take him to a doctor's appointment or sit with him at home or, smoke a joint with him or something. And so we had plenty of time to talk. And he told me more than once that he goes, oh man, that's, I'll never forgive myself for that. And that's the worst thing. I said, actually, you do have to forgive yourself. And I want to make that as easy as possible for you to do that now, because I guess the way he put it was that, if Sweet Savage never broke up, you wouldn't have gotten that plane, you wouldn't hurt yourself. And I'm like, well, maybe something worse would have happened, who knows? But I said, I never thought of that. I never thought of it like that.
No.
I forgive you. I've had a fantastic life post Sweet Savage. And, you got to let this go. There's nothing in me that holds a grudge. I forgive you. I fucked up too. I did all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, we all did, we were kids, and, and I think, I really feel, not just think, I really feel that he had let that go with me, personally. So I don't think he carried that into, and it was a great thing for me. I mean, what if I had just heard that he passed and I was living in California and he was going to be like, oh gosh, that's really sad. But in the back of my mind, there would have been like, I wish I would have had that one more chance to say goodbye we had months to do that. And we were even working on a song that we had started years and years ago called Rock Factory. I have some little video and he was writing lyrics down.
Sure.
2 weeks before he passed. So
Sure.
if that's not reconciliation or if that's forgiveness, or we were still working on a song up until he couldn't move anymore. So
Are there any other recordings of Sweet Savage or stuff that you just did that hasn't been released? I know you did Sweet Savage. You put out, I think it was in 2004, an album. It had the demos, it had some live stuff. So is there anything else out there that you have been working on, or what's going on with Sweet Savage music that you can tell us now?
okay. I had there was a lot of live tapes. Unfortunately, it was somebody sitting back by the bar with an old VHS camera, and because the microphone was there, hey, give me a photo jack with a, somebody's ordering drinks, or, and we're like, on the stage. So it's of dubious quality, sound quality, really. And I think I released on that Archives CD what was the best. The best quality, song performance, as well as audio fidelity. And actually, I had Mikey Davis master that. Okay. Mikey Davis did the Sweet Savage EP back in 85, but he also did, Keel and Dawkins. I mean, it was like a who's who of 80s rock that Mikey Davis, the engineer, did. And sometimes, and he's like, oh, the producer, but sometimes the engineer's the guy. He's the guy that actually turns the knobs, and he's the one when the producer's chit-chatting over there, and you're like, can you just turn it up a little? You get this little thing going on with this. So he's a fantastic guy, and he did a great job with remastering it. But what I've done is I've taken some of the songs just rhythm tracks, just on the 4-track, just on the, computer, that they're ones that we never recorded, to maybe get somebody, maybe guests, and just sing them, get them, and then go in, demo them, and then go into the studio. That's one thing, one track I would like to do, is to finally record those songs. But Walt's gone, Joey's gone, and just so whoever I could get, I know I can just play that to a click track or a drum track, and add the stuff later. It's digital these days. That would be one thing, to have at least some definitive demo quality version of those songs, just for prestige, just because it never happened, and some bits and pieces that we never really completely worked up. And then there's a lot of stuff I've worked on since then. I actually did a power trio for briefly, did a few gigs. So I had written some, and it was me singing. So maybe that's where it's going. I don't know if that was quite ready for prime time when I was doing that, and it was 2012 or something like that.
Mhm.
And there was a couple of Spiders and Snakes gigs that we did at the Whiskey, like 2014 maybe, 10 years. That Lizzie couldn't make it. He wasn't feeling well. So we had worked the songs up three-piece, and
I saw some of those on your YouTube channel.
yeah. A couple of my sang. So, maybe something along those
Yeah.
lines. I love a power trio. I mean, there's just it's so raw, and
Right.
it kind of gives you something that you can't get any other way.
You-
It's got limitations, it's got big
Sure.
limitations, but with that, it's got its own flavor. So I've got stuff, the old stuff that never, it's like new because it never really got released. I've thought and hoped maybe that some of these up and coming bands, because as great as it is that all the originals, I don't want to call us old people, but the original 80s are out there doing it, and doing it, like I said, doing it top level.
Yeah.
But you got to have the next generation. Who's the news guys? Is this, Crazy Licks? Is it, there's some bands,
Sure.
I see them on Insta, but I would like to kind of maybe get with one of these bands or a couple of them and produce them, maybe say, hey, here's some songs, that
Right.
never got released. It would be like stuff from the 80s, like time capsule,
Sure.
but put it in a new band
Yes.
with young guys,
Yes.
who are
Yes.
out there doing it. And then for the young people, I think, because they're still youth anthems. They're still young people's
Totally.
songs. I mean, I'm still young people, so are you. And it's like, but I think the next gen, I think the bands that are in their early 20s could benefit. I mean, I think I could help somebody just maybe accelerate their
Sure.
learning curve, some songs, some production techniques, if nothing else, to talk about the old stories.
Absolutely. Somebody we haven't mentioned now for a while is your brother Lane. What is he doing now? And are you guys like, does he have any musical aspirations yet, or is he kind of past all that?
Yeah, he's kind of past it. He really hung up his bass after, the Strip and Sweet Savage, and he did a couple bands afterwards.
Sure.
But once that really dissipated, he moved on. He moved to Florida, and actually, when he did, this was, God, it must have been 25 years ago. He started talking about doing something different. I was up in the air, he was underwater. He's swimming with wild dolphins in the Bahamas, working on a tour boat. So people from Japan or all over the world come to West Palm to go out on this boat and swim with wild dolphins. And he did that for like 10 or 15 years, and just had a great experience, but completely otherworldly,
Yeah.
completely away from the music. He's got friends that have bands. He goes and hangs with them, and they always ask him to sit in or rehearse with them. It's just not. I'm sure he could pick up the bass and in a couple weeks have his chops back up to
Yeah.
speed and calluses, and maybe it'll happen sometime. But
Yeah.
he's really expressed no interest in it.
Sure.
Which is fine because gone on to other things. He's a really great artist. He
Sure.
paints, and so there's a lot of creative expression,
Yeah.
and living his life in Florida.
Awesome. Awesome. So can you and I've kept you on here for so long, and I'm so appreciative of all of your
Oh, I can
time.
talk for hours.
Oh, and I love all the stories you've told. So tell us what is life like for right now for Chris Sheridan? What do you do to keep yourself busy, and we've kind of hit on maybe some of the goals that you have, maybe get into production, working into younger bands. But tell us what you have going on now.
Well, I'm in North Texas. It's almost Oklahoma. It's that
Okay.
far north, a place called Sherman. It's kind of a small town, almost like the size of the small town I grew up in.
Sure.
I've been in a relationship for a long time,
Okay.
and there's grandkids,
Okay.
and technically not blood relatives with mine,
Sure.
but I've been with them, forever, and that's fun. Little domestic
Sure.
life suits me well.
Sure.
But I'm working on a book that I'm writing. It's a flying thing. I'm probably
Sure.
sorting out some of my my demons there
Sure.
with that. I'd like to say I've got a whole host of this and I'm busy and I just can't stop doing this. I am busy. There's just a lot of things
Sure.
living life. I think most of the things I have, I'm working on. I had a
Yeah.
podcast for a while. I did about 75 episodes. I may pick that back up again. It's a
Yep.
little more metaphysical and that kind of stuff, which
Yep.
I always enjoyed. I was reading metaphysical books on the road. People thought it was weird, but
Right.
some of these things I'm doing is, oh, this second life other than music. I
Yeah.
was actually kind of into that even back then, so I've
Right.
had a chance to explore some of those and definitely enough to keep me busy,
Sure.
with life in general. But I have my guitar, play every night and I can plug in. What I'm really missing though is getting in a room with some guys and cranking up and
Yep.
just there's nothing, you can't get that any other way. You can put
Yep.
the headphones on and do 24 tracks and wow, this is awesome. But boy, you get in a room pushing air and your ears ringing afterwards and sweating, that's if I'm missing out one thing right now, it's probably that. So hopefully I'll get something together soon.
Man, you have such an amazing story and your resilience and I feel like I'm a pretty positive person coming back from addiction and stuff. And I look at you dealt with addiction, you dealt with a plane crash, you ended up paralyzed. And to look at you now, you have your hair, you look young, you are so positive. I just feel it coming from you. So it's just been amazing to hear all of your stories.
All right. Well, thanks for letting me share and having me on. And one thing I have to say about the plane crash and Sweet Savage breaking up, by the time I broke my back in the plane crash, I was already had been so devastated by the demise of Sweet Savage because it wasn't a band, it was my dream. It was
Yeah.
really the only band I was ever in to speak of, other than just hanging out in clubs or whatever as a teenager. So I don't know if this is actually true or not, but it may. I feel it sometimes. Sweet Savage breaking up was worse than me breaking my back in a plane crash.
Right.
So by the time that happened, I'm like, I'm okay. I've had worse.
But I mean, a lot of people. So okay, I won't say any names, but I've reached out. There are a lot of musicians that I loved back in the day that I've said, hey, would you like to come on and tell your story? And I've interviewed some fairly big names, Mark Kendall and stuff.
Yeah, I
So
saw that one.
so anyway, but some people are still so hurt by not achieving what they thought. They don't even want to talk about it. You know
Oh,
what I'm
really?
saying? Like, and
I didn't
they're
know
they're
that, but that makes sense.
they're polite. They appreciate that I'm a fan, but I've heard from a few people, it's too hard to talk about this thing that didn't become what I wanted it to be.
To this day, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
To this day. And to hear,
Well,
I
I'm
mean, like,
sort of the epitome of a band that didn't make it in that sense because we
right.
were so big.
Yes.
Lesser bands made it,
Right. Right.
So I get it,
Yeah.
and it is hard. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not lying when I'm saying that, you can't really compare a plane crash and paralysis to a band
Yes.
breaking up. They're kind of two different things, but
Yes.
they're both traumatic and they both represent a loss of something you can't do
Yes.
anymore.
Yes.
And I swear that was, I'm probably more affected by the Sweet Savage thing or have been over the years.
Sure.
Reconciling with Joey it's been 3 years ago, I think almost to the day that he passed. That really helped, put a lot of that stuff in order.
Yep.
But what's helping now is sharing my story. I got all the archives. Joey and I got together and we combined boxes and I got all the digital files that he had and I gave him
Yep.
mine. So I'm sitting on a heap of this stuff and it's kind of the Sweet Savage saga is like, it's like every band's story, even though we were sort of the epitome of it. If you want to know what it was like to be a kid, a teenager in a small town, Midwest nowhere, and move to LA and be in the middle of the Sunset Strip scene with your band and doing it up, playing all the big clubs right in the heyday, and and then have it not work out.
Yeah.
but that's the story, and that's every band's story that didn't really make it, because it's some version of that.
I'm not sure what kind of footage exists from. I know there's like I've seen a lot of the live footage, but your story is begging for a documentary, a book. Because
Yes and
there's
yes.
I've seen many other bands that I'd never heard of, and tell similar stories. Whether they're on Amazon Prime or on YouTube. But you guys did have. I mean, you were in Kerrang magazine. You were on the cover. You developed this name, and it's a fascinating story. And then to then get into what happened afterwards, Joey C. Jones going on, your accident. I mean, so somebody out there in Hollywood land, or I mean, you did your mini
Yeah.
documentary called Walk This Way, which what but somehow your story. So I'm glad you are here telling your story. I you talked about writing, a book or a documentary would be fantastic. And I hope that you've expressed an interest in getting out there and playing.
Yeah.
Your attitude and just your positivity is infectious. So I can't imagine that a band wouldn't benefit from having you. So I'm rooting for you. And if
All right.
and if there's ever anything that I know I'm kind of small still, but if there's ever anything you want to promote, love to have you back on and
Okay.
promote stuff.
Anytime. Yeah.
So, but it's been awesome hearing your story, and I thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Anthony. This has really been a blast. And if me sharing my story make it a little bit easier for some of these guys you're talking about that are, I feel it, guys. But it does help. It sucks and it's hard sometimes, but it does help to talk about, how it is to share stories about strength and hope can be in the program. So,
Well, yeah, and I've felt like, geez, even when I get down, sometimes like I've gone and talked to schools about because I was a teacher for 12 years. Sharing my story of my alcoholism has helped me to deal with it. I imagine, what you're doing has to be kind of cathartic to go through the. Anyway, now we're continuing,
yeah,
but
no, but it might help someone else tell their
yes,
story on your show by me
yeah.
sharing mine. So that would be even better.
This was awesome. And man, you're just an inspirational story, man.
Thanks again, man. This has been fun.
Hey, Chris, anytime. And we're rooting for you, and we'll see you down the road.